Chapter 602. William was immersed in the images in front of him. The third era, the second era, the first era. After that, it was the age of gods that everyone yearned for. He looked at the history of the entire gods' continent, as if he was viewing flowers on horseback. When all the images disappeared and William came back to his senses, he found that he was no longer in the Temple of Time. Instead, he was next to a vast blue lake. Not far away, there were tall trees that stretched as far as the eye could see, and there were many strange magical beasts and animals drinking water all around. When a carnivorous magical beast dashed out, the herbivores that were drinking water scattered in all directions. He glanced at his left hand. The Dream of Eternity scroll had disappeared. Fortunately, his equipment and space ring were still there. But the data panel, why didn't there be any changes? It's not that there are no changes. It just stopped. William frowned. The time on the data panel was still in the fourth era. It seemed to indicate that he was dreaming and had not traveled back in time. Forget it. I'll look around first. However, ding dong. Prompt. You have used the Dream of Eternity scroll. Prompt. You are in a very special state. Please study by yourself. Gosh, that's it? William's eyes widened. What a simple explanation. Study by myself? How ridiculous was that? But in his previous life, he had used the Dream of Eternity scroll. He could more or less guess the similarities between the two. That was, he had become a bystander. God's perspective. No matter what happened in front of him, there seemed to be an invisible wall in front of him that prevented him from interfering. For example, when he suddenly appeared by the lake, the magical beasts acted as if they did not see him. They continued to drink water and hunt for food. This was a time period that had already happened. It was like a dream. He had returned to this time period, but his real body was not in this time and space. Naturally, he could not change what had happened here. But Moses had mentioned that he might have done something in this time and space. What was it for? William's head hurt from thinking about it. He turned into a bolt of lightning and flew into the sky. He wanted to see what the creatures in the mythological era looked like. After William flew thousands of meters into the sky, he realized that he had only caught a glimpse of the lake. It was a rare sight in this forest. This was because this forest was far larger than he had imagined. In the mountains and forests, magical beasts ran amok. All kinds of gigantic creatures appeared from time to time. Some giant dragons were knocked down by some giant beasts that leapt into the air. There were also super magical beasts that were hundreds of meters long that were rampaging about. They could be called beast-type bulldozers. There was also a 1,000-meter-tall cyclops covered in blood, carrying a giant crocodile on his back. He was walking slowly toward his cave. As for the mace in his hand, holy sh*T, why does it feel like he's just a stick that's made up of all sorts of super rare mineral veins? Apart from that, there were also all sorts of crackling sounds that sounded like they were about to tear the entire world apart. William could not help but swallow his saliva when he sensed the ancient and boundless aura. It was a pity he wasn't really in this space, so he couldn't directly feel the intoxicating atmosphere. He could only feel this world through what he saw and heard. These guys are at least legendary, right? William's eyes widened. It was hard to imagine how rich the magic aura of this era was. He didn't know how many mineral veins there were under his feet. D*MN. Whenever I think of mineral veins, my heart hurts. The prince covered his eyes and wanted to cry. In this day and age, mana veins and metal veins should be everywhere. Not to mention moving some, they couldn't even touch them. D*MN. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have used this lousy scroll. Don't you know that a thief doesn't leave empty-handed? You're cheating me. The prince hung his head dejectedly and flew to a random location. Anyway, he was in his own dream. He couldn't touch others, and others couldn't touch him either. Of course, he could only see all kinds of shocking scenery. It was simple. Even if he wanted to die, he wouldn't die anyway. Time passed. William didn't know how many times the speed of sound it was. Finally, after a few hours, he encountered a tribe of intelligent races at the edge of the forest. Oh, this was a human tribe. There were tens of thousands of people, and it seemed to be a large tribe. In this era, most of the people in the human tribe were still wearing animal skins, but the priests of the tribe were wearing magic robes that weren't considered exquisite. TSK, are they natural, or are they acquired through training? But since they're magic robes, there should be a town nearby. Otherwise, how can there be cloth? William didn't pay much attention to this group of naked savages. It was too explicit, and some of them even started piping outside. If he saw too much, he would definitely get corns. It was not suitable for children. He was still underage. However, he had already discovered the signs of the existence of the gods. It was a statue. It was an exquisite statue of the fire god. At the position of the statue's fingers, there was an almost inextinguishable flame. Every time a human went to fetch the fire, they would kneel on the ground devoutly. They wanted to stick their faces to the ground before they fetched the flame with a look of worship. It was obvious that the existence and importance of fire was self-evident. Only by successfully using and preserving the flame, humans would have the opportunity to advance from the era of survival to the era of production. It wasn't hard to imagine the importance of the fire god to these primitive people. However, the reincarnation of the fire god didn't come from the legendary continent, so William didn't know much about him. But he was really fierce, so it was enough to remember this. Oh, he didn't know how different Burn Cinder was from the reincarnation of the fire god after the dragon and phoenix bring prosperity. William once again flew to a higher place. Not long after, he found signs of human habitation, and he saw houses that looked more real. There were at least hundreds of thousands of humans living here. The humans here also believed in the fire god, and their totem was also in the shape of a flame. More importantly, he found that there were a lot of professionals here. However, most of them were beginner-level and middle-level professionals. The number of advanced professionals was also very small. It was hard to imagine that in this era where magic was abundant, the number of professionals in the human race was so small. But soon, William discovered a problem. It was that this group of so-called professionals didn't practice any skills. It was purely because the density of magic was too exaggerated. When they breathed naturally, the magic gradually entered their bodies, making them professionals with energy. But they were obviously not good at using energy. They were as stupid as fools. Oh, it should be because the path to the divine path hasn't been popularized. While William was deep in thought, he saw a group of tall elves suddenly near the gathering place. Not long after, the human leader of the gathering place walked out. He had a dark expression as he presented hundreds of strong men. There were no women. Don't ask William why he kept talking to himself. It was because he couldn't understand the language of this group of fellows. The mainframe didn't translate for him. It seemed that it was because he wasn't really in this space and time. But since there were no women, the use of these men was obvious. The young elf lady definitely wouldn't fancy this group of uncouth men. They were probably used as slaves. TSK. Before the Third Era, the elves were always very strong. William was very curious, so he followed the thousands of elves home. He wanted to see where they lived. And William was even more curious, since the elves were born from the World Tree. But before the elves practiced their skills, who was protecting them? Why didn't anyone take away the World Tree? Night fell quickly. William arrived at the elven settlement that was filled with torches. There were even fewer elves here. There were only tens of thousands of them, but they had bullied hundreds of thousands of humans. If some humans returned here and saw this scene, they would definitely be extremely sad. They would want to rush out and kill all the elves. Fortunately, William didn't care. He wasn't a human. He wasn't an elf either. He was a half-elf. He was proud. Unsurprisingly, after the group of human males were captured by the elves, they didn't even see the young ladies of the elven race before they were all taken away to mine. This was similar to how he captured the orcs to mine in the past. And most importantly, the elves of this era also believed in gods. But their beliefs were different. It was a statue of a goddess, and this statue seemed to be emitting the aura of life. Many injured elves sat around the statue, and their wounds were slowly recovering. It was amazing. The goddess of life. In that case, the goddess of life is the backer of the elves? William carefully looked at the statue of the goddess of life. He didn't know why. He suddenly felt that this goddess of life gave him a very familiar feeling. The corners of William's mouth twitched. He muttered in his heart, "It can't be that accurate, right?" After all, the statue and his mother were obviously not the same person. But come to think of it, how could the reincarnated gods look like the same person? Of course, it could be that I'm wrong. I didn't have any signs of awakening my memory, so I don't think she's the reincarnation of the goddess of life. William clenched his small fist and nodded with certainty. If he was really the reincarnation of the goddess of life. Oh, a family of 3. His parents were gods, and they were even gods. Gosh, it was Alexander. William stared at the statue of the goddess for a long time before flying into the distance. In a faraway place, there was a huge tree in the endless forest. From afar, the other trees that were thousands of meters tall looked like saplings. They couldn't be compared to the tree. Obviously, that was the world tree. Meanwhile, in a palace at the top of the world tree, a goddess in a white dress blinked her eyes and curiously shifted her attention to a certain statue. She then carefully observed the surroundings. It was a pity. That feeling disappeared. Or rather, it was more like a hallucination. No, how can I have a hallucination? The goddess in the white dress frowned. She even wanted to go over and take a closer look. She wanted to find that familiar feeling again. However, a female legendary elf suddenly came to the door and gently knocked on it. "Come in." The female elf carefully opened the door and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, goddess of life." "What's the matter?" That. Ask that be asterisk star to get lost. Yes. Goddess, please calm down. I'll reject the god of fate." The female elf saw that the goddess of life was furious again, so she quickly closed the door and left. It had to be said, the god of fate was also a weirdo. In this era, where thousands of gods were competing for faith, he neither trained nor spread his teachings. There were almost no believers in the world, but he persisted in chasing after the goddess of life. But what were the gods doing now? They were studying hard, training hard, and spreading their faith. The goddess of life had no time to care about this kind of poor student. In a sentence, the goddess of life looked down on this kind of person. What did the goddess of life say? "Let me marry you? In my next life." Chapter 603. The complete God's continent was too big. William was unable to explore the entire world at a speed that was several times faster than the speed of sound. But after a few months, he saw an exciting world. However, when he flew out of the atmosphere and wanted to quietly admire the scenery of the continent, he realized that the flow of time had accelerated. He was originally a bystander. Now, he seemed to have become pure. He could clearly see that everything on the God's continent was constantly developing and changing at a rapid speed. The humans were constantly growing. They no longer appeared in the form of a gathering place. Instead, they learned to build cities and understood the importance of city walls for safety. He saw groups and groups of orcs. These little bastards were like a bunch of lunatics, causing destruction everywhere they went. This caused many races to be filled with hostility towards the orcs. They even formed an alliance and clamored to destroy these little bastards of a tribe every day. He saw a group of humanoid creatures that seemed to have gills on their necks. They looked thin and small. They were born to live on the continent and in the water. They lived by the sea. But they had sharp teeth and were somewhat cruel. They did not get along with most races. They seemed to be the future deep-sea race. In this era, giant dragons were a group of slightly larger insects. These large insects were social animals. Whether it was the metal dragons or the elemental dragons, they lived in groups. They were afraid of being captured as food by the powerful super-magical beasts and various giant monsters. The belief of the gods was constantly spreading. It was like a poison that covered the entire God's continent. In the endless sea, there were wars everywhere because of belief. Because in this era, the humans, orcs, winged people, elves, dwarves, and so on were extremely weak. There was no need for the gods to appear. Just a slight display of miracles from their statues would cause countless creatures to use their lives to fulfill the will of the gods. War. Endless war. Because of different beliefs, there were constant wars. Even the elves did not only believe in the goddess of life. He could clearly see many gods secretly taking advantage of the elves and bewitching them to believe in them. This war, because of belief, had been going on for countless years. Countless corpses were buried in this land. Finally, the war of the gods had begun. Some of the gods whose believers had been completely robbed burst out, roaring in despair, and began to madly attack the gods who were the most hostile to them. At first, these gods didn't know how to protect the land they lived in. They were unscrupulous in their destruction. They were gods. Their battles could easily take the lives of countless living beings. It was only after a long time that the space of the sage seat was unexpectedly opened. He then entered the space to fight and prevent the destruction of the gods' continent. However, the war between the gods for faith was still going on. Every once in a while, there would be gods fighting each other, and there would even be gods falling. During this period of time, the cultivation method of the divine path began to spread. Humans, the winged clan, the elves, the dwarves, the giant dragons, the little mermen, and so on, all the intelligent races in the gods' continent received all kinds of cultivation methods. The number of legendary professionals also gradually increased. However, this was also achieved purely by relying on dense magic power. His combat style was still a bit lacking. William did not know which god had created this technique. Perhaps it was a sage technique, but it must have been created by many gods. They had felt the danger of losing their faith. The gods were preparing in advance. It was as if he wanted to study the divine path and the divine path to see which had the greater potential. At this moment, William suddenly lost control of his body. He was sucked away by a huge gravitational force. Very soon, it was as if he had traveled through time and space. William arrived at the highest peak of the gods' continent. If there were no accidents, this peak should be called the Peak of the Gods. A huge palace was built there. It was faintly discernible in the sea of clouds. It was like a heavenly realm. William was very curious about who this palace belonged to. However, the gravitational force did not give him the opportunity to look at the door number. It directly pulled him into the main hall of the palace. At this moment, the prince was dumbfounded. He was almost scared out of his wits. There were more than 700 gods gathered in this palace. They sat on their thrones, forming a huge ring. They looked at each other with indifferent expressions. The seats seemed to be very far from each other, but to the gods, this distance was useless. But William was in the center of the gods. Gulp. William swallowed hard. He felt that this was a trap. He was afraid that if he suddenly appeared in front of them and was no longer a bystander, he would definitely be in big trouble. But he discovered a problem. This group of people were all deities, and not a single one of them had reached the level of an overgod. Yes, none of the 700 gods were Lord gods. For now, there was no difference in their strength. Perhaps there was a top god, but no matter how strong he was, he could not defeat 700 gods. What was more interesting was William could suddenly hear what they were saying. Or rather, the language of the gods was the first language in the gods' world. He could naturally understand it. And according to the language, he saw many people. The god of space, the god of light, the god of darkness, the god of fire, the goddess of luck and goddess of misfortune. Oh, they seemed to be sisters. The two of them were sitting on the same throne. They looked like a pair of lilies. Subsequently, the god of Sunday, the god of war, the god of Hades, the god of death, the goddess of death. There were many gods of the same element. But according to the seats, they were divided into the strong and the weak. Of course, he also saw the goddess of life and a bootlicker next to her. That person did not care about the content of the meeting. He just supported his chin with his hand, tilted his head, and stared at the goddess of life. He wanted to fuse her body with his. But even if it was a ring thrown, there was a difference between before and after. This guy could sit next to the goddess of life, and he seemed to be in the center position. He looked very arrogant. And Thor, the god of thunder, looked like a fool. He was 5 meters tall, and his muscles were as hard as steel. He was staring at the god of swords, Sadaros, and they could not wait to fight. But this was not the most important thing. He also saw his own wife, Sith. The goddess of magic was still so beautiful. Although there were some differences from her reincarnation, she did not seem to have changed much. She was still as beautiful as before. Anyway, she was beautiful. She was wearing a snow-white magic cannon, and her eyes were half closed. She had no intention of talking, and she did not care what this group of people said. But William still found something special about Sith. Or rather, she was beautiful and powerful. Many male gods wanted to get close to his wife, but it was a pity that they did not have the chance. This group of smart guys was too good-looking. They were not as good-looking as him. In particular, most of the 700 gods were training maniacs. They wanted to step into a higher realm. Only a few of them were silly and naive, and they were always in love. This caused the number of children of God to be extremely low. There were less than 1/10 of the reincarnations of the gods. What piqued William's curiosity the most was that he realized there was one person he couldn't see through. It was as if there was a layer of fog on that person's body, blocking his eyes. But when others looked at that guy, they did not feel as if they were covered by the fog. But something even stranger happened. The guy with the fog on his face suddenly opened his eyes and looked at him with a thoughtful look. He seemed to be smiling at him. "Gosh, I want to go home." William roared in his heart. The hair on his back stood up. He felt that something was wrong. Fortunately, this group of people were all gods. If they were gods, they might really be able to discover William. It was a pity. William had underestimated the sensitivity of this group of gods. When that bastard with the fog on his face smiled at William, all the gods in the field fell silent. All of them had puzzled expressions on their faces as they began to stare straight at the centermost position. At that moment, William felt that their gazes had penetrated through time and space and were looking at him. At that moment, William felt as if countless mountains were pressing down on him. He could not breathe. It was true. He was just an ordinary little legendary. One could not imagine the feeling of more than 700 gods staring at him at the same time. At this moment, his father's blood essence was useless. He really couldn't take it anymore, because there were many peak gods in the field. Meanwhile, the eyes of the god of space turned silvery white. He looked carefully for a long time. Then he raised his eyebrows and said, "Come out. I don't know what method you used to prevent me from seeing you. Do you really think that we can't find you? We're all gods. Why are you hiding? Do you think we'll eat you? You're so timid. What's the difference between you and those ants?" The god of the underworld sneered. "Maybe you'll eat him as soon as he comes out. After all, you never spit out the bones when you eat people." The god of darkness smacked his lips and said teasingly. The god of the underworld gritted his teeth and scolded, "Are you crazy? Come on, I'll wait for you here. Come and kill me. I can't wait any longer." The god of darkness stuck out his tongue. He did not look like a big boss at all. When William saw this, he could not help but heave a sigh of relief. But he wanted to say that he could not come out, especially as time passed. He realized that this group of people did not want to wait any longer. There were more than 700 gods in total. Besides the bewildered Moses, the surprised goddess of life, and the god of fate, who was scratching his head, all of them were gathering their divine power to blast William out. At this moment, William felt the threat of death. He roared wildly and kept waving his fists, trying to break the barrier that was blocking him. However, everything was useless. He could not exert any strength at all. But just as they were about to attack, his mind suddenly lit up. He immediately roared, "Odin!" At that moment, divine light appeared. Over 700 divinities chose to stop, because a handsome man with light and thunder appeared in front of them. God of the same race. His name was Odin. Although they did not know what method he used, not only did he stealthily hide here, but they almost did not discover him. But he was a god, a newborn god. He was not weak, so he was qualified to participate in this meeting. There was no need to fight. Moses, the goddess of life, and the god of fate no longer had that bewildered expression. They seemed to have forgotten that familiar feeling. Just when everyone's attention was on Odin, Odin suddenly appeared. William finally saw the man with a bewildered expression. That was just like a long river filled with the sand of time was surging and circulating, penetrating the universe. Subsequently, the face of the god of time returned to normal. He no longer had the gaze that could see through William. Chapter 604. Odin, come and sit here. Thor, the simple-minded god of thunder, greeted him warmly, which was not in line with his personality. The god of light narrowed his eyes and said jealously, Odin, come here. You are the god of light and thunder. Light is in front, thunder is behind. You should sit with us gods of light. Odin glanced at the two of them, but in the end, he did not go anywhere. Instead, he walked towards a group of weak gods. When the latter saw Odin walking over, they were obviously happy. The situation was obvious. Even if no one had become the main god, everyone knew that there was still a realm above them. Now, it was a matter of who could step into it first. Among them, the god of light was the first to be born. The god of thunder was the first to be born. In addition, there were the gods of fire, sea, earth, and so on. There were more gods who had awakened these attributes, and they had long formed their own factions. As for the god of the underworld, the goddess of magic, the god of swords, the god of death, the god of time, the god of space, and so on, they either roped in some gods or did not form their own small circles, but no one dared to provoke them, because they were all the first batch of gods to be born. After being born, they had devoured unimaginable magic power. Now, they had long reached the peak of the gods. With just a little faith, they could step into the position of the main god in the future. But the gods, there are many strange gods. For example, the god of love, the god of wealth, the goddess of wisdom, the god of fertility, and so on. After all, these gods were born according to the rules of heaven and earth. They symbolized different meanings and had their own beliefs. But no matter how strong they were, they could not compare to the gods of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, thunder, wind, time, and other elements. Whether it was in terms of battle prowess or numbers, they were crushed in all aspects. Not only did no one play with them, but no one liked to talk to them. They would even bully these gods who had weak combat power from time to time. For example, from time to time, they would plunder their shrines and rob their believers. Anyway, there were countless tricks between the gods. Even if they could not kill you, they would disgust you to death. So the addition of Odin, a god of light and thunder, really made them a little excited, thinking that they had a big brother to lead them. When Thor saw this, he curled his lips. TSK, TSK, another one with no future. Odin didn't respond to him and just sat calmly in his seat. Meanwhile, the meeting continued. And the content of the meeting. Naturally, it was the issue of the divine path and the divine path. No one was paying attention to William's actions. The prince sat in the middle of the room and listened obediently. He watched this group of people quarrel with each other for a good 8 to 9 hours, and the water element rose sharply. Only then did he understand the contradiction between the gods. There were 3 points. The purpose of spreading the divine path. The disadvantages of the divine path being widespread. There was also the way to convert the divine path to the divine path. 1. The purpose of spreading the divine path was the same as what William had thought. Now, many gods had realized the disadvantages of belief, but the belief was not that difficult to deal with. It did not cause them to feel a sense of crisis, so they did not pay attention to it. Therefore, even though the divine path had been popularized, only a few gods with foresight had been doing this, trying to see how far the divine path could go. For example, the god of time, the goddess of life, the goddess of magic, the god of war, the god of earth, and so on. 2. The disadvantages of the popularization of the divine path. It would definitely make the intelligent creatures stronger and more uncontrollable, which was not beneficial to the acquisition of belief. This was one of the most common thoughts of those who opposed it. They believed that as intelligent beings became more powerful, they would no longer be able to provide even pure faith. In fact, because they had enough power and could protect themselves, they would no longer believe in gods. 3. It was very difficult to convert the divine path to the divine path. It was even impossible to achieve. This was a problem that the gods had discovered after the divine path had been popularized. They had not thought of a way to reincarnate, or rather, the sense of crisis was not that serious. The idea of reincarnation and rebirth was not within their scope of consideration. If you ask me, it's a dark path. As long as you become a Lord God, the problem of belief might be completely resolved. Everyone has not become a Lord God. Why do you think that belief is a poison? The God of light saw that everyone was arguing, so he spoke. The God of hunting suddenly laughed coldly. Yes, you can become a Lord God, but we can't become a Lord God in this lifetime. Aren't we just waiting for death? Abandon belief and slowly strip it away. How are you going to die? The God of light said in a low voice. What a joke. You wanted to cultivate slowly? Many of the gods began to laugh coldly. Obviously, these people who had tasted the sweetness would definitely not give up on this method of leveling up quickly. Stripping away belief would cause their strength to plummet. Some of them had never eaten a magic or vein before and directly relied on belief to rise. They might even fall straight to the legendary realm. And so, Odin, the newbie listener who had been silent for a long time, coughed softly. More than 700 gods turned to look at him, as if wanting to know what this newcomer had to say. And they had to say something. This guy called Odin had hidden himself very well. He had never appeared before, and now he had the aura of a mid-level god the moment he appeared. He was even one step away from becoming a high-level god. This guy might have the potential to become a Lord God. I've been listening for a long time. Coupled with the popularization of the divine path, I also realized that I can more or less understand what you mean. But the God of light said one thing that was not wrong. As Odin spoke, he gave him a look that said he had faith in him. The God of light's lips curled into a smile. As expected, you still want to have a relationship with me? That muscular God of thunder is a younger brother. Your choice is definitely correct. However, Odin did not choose to have a relationship with him on the spot. He only continued, none of us has reached the Lord level yet. How do we know that the problem of belief cannot be solved? So, why don't we all wait a little longer? The problem of belief is still a small matter. We can use some secret techniques to block out the noise. If someone reaches the Lord level and finds out whether the problem of belief can be solved, then it won't be too late to discuss this problem. There's no need to argue endlessly over this topic. Seconded, the God of soul nodded indifferently. The gods looked at this old guy. If there was anyone who could solve the problem of belief, the God of soul had the highest possibility. Seconded, the God of magic sneaked a glance at Moses and also spoke with his group of minions. The God of time glanced at the gods. Very well, but the divine path still needs to be popularized. We even need to increase its power so that all intelligent races understand the importance of cultivation methods and try to deduce the saint realm or even the path beyond saint realm. Otherwise, if we still can't solve the problem of belief after reaching the Lord level, this will really be our only way out. The God of space nodded. Seconded. Seeing that the two leaders had agreed, the others naturally nodded as well. In fact, the reason why Odin spoke up was that these gods had too poor a concept of time, discussing a trivial matter over and over again. Even if they could not come up with a reasonable result, they had to continue debating, so that they could continue talking. This meeting could go on for 3 years. But it was also at this moment that the god of the underworld suddenly looked at the life goddess's bootlicker and said, "Rogers, call me the god of fate." The latter replied coldly. The god of the underworld's mouth twitched, but he still said helplessly, "Help us deduce the divine path mission more. Don't let them take the wrong path. After all, you should know better than anyone how far we can go." As soon as he said that, the gods all looked at this Rogers Providence. Who was he? The god of fate? Bullshit. That was what he called himself. His divine title was his surname, Providence, because his personal providence represented the direction of the providence of the gods. Did he need to cultivate? No. It was enough for the other gods to cultivate. He could ride on the providence of the gods. When the providence of the gods decreased, his providence plummeted. When the providence of the gods increased, his providence skyrocketed. When he asked others to call him the god of fate, it was actually a bit pretentious. There was no such person in the divine circle. Rogers was the luckiest one, but also the unluckiest one, because his life and death were tied together with all the gods. The gods would not die. He would not die. Even if hundreds of gods wanted to kill him, the heavens would help him escape. But if the gods died, even if he reached the Lord level and did not have a single believer and did not need to worry about the problem of faith, he would still die with the gods. That was the most unbearable. No matter how hard you worked, you could become a rich man or a beggar. That was the saddest thing. This was also the key reason why he did not cultivate all day and chased after the goddess every day. But the crisis had not reached that point yet. Roger's providence had also reached the peak of the gods, and he also had immeasurable strength and ability, which led to the other gods not daring to offend him too much. It could be said, he was the most mysterious one among the gods because almost no one had ever seen him in action, let alone know what he was capable of. If he had any methods, that was that this person was extremely arrogant and stole their providence all day, but no one cared. Anyway, when everyone was unlucky, don't think you're too lucky. And the god of light also nodded. That's right, the providence of US gods can't be calculated. Only you can know, so help us. Bullsh asterisk T, I don't want to live anymore. My goddess is ignoring me. I'm going to take you to the gods yellow. Roger's providence completely ignored this group of people and immediately shouted like a madman. Fortunately, the god of war sat next to him and quickly covered his mouth, afraid that his words would cause everyone's providence to drop. After a long while, the gods noticed that the providence did not decrease, so they all coldly criticized. Let me tell you, Rogers, your life belongs to everyone. Stop talking nonsense. Rogers, who was locked down by the strong man, struggled, unable to say anything. Why is the providence of our gods locked on you? Damn it, it's so infuriating. The space god was so angry that he cursed. Fortunately, after a while, they hurriedly looked at each other and comforted. The goddess of life is testing you. Don't ask for life and death so easily as a god. You have to be full of goodness and beauty. Do you understand? Yes, goddess of life, right? The goddess of luck also hurriedly said. All of a sudden, the goddess of life's ears were filled with voice transmissions. She could only grit her teeth and clench her fists. Yes. She looked back at Rogers with a charming smile. You haven't become a lord yet. I think it's still too early for you to get married. Roger's providence slammed the table, and the god of war hurriedly let go, afraid that he would force this guy into a corner. He took a breath of his own providence. Okay, let's talk about it after I become a lord. The gods breathed a sigh of relief. But this guy continued. You guys hurry up and cultivate. I'll rely on you guys to become a lord. The gods vomited blood. Odin also almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He finally understood why his father was so terrifying. He also understood why the god of massacre had retreated in fear when he sensed his father's aura. Because this father of his was basically invincible among the gods. That's right, among the gods. He was the invincible one. There was no other way. The gods were like a speeding sports car. Every part of the car was very important. But the most important part was the steering wheel. And Rogers was the steering wheel. He could make the gods overturn at any time. In terms of shamelessness, William felt that compared to his father, there was still a huge gap between him and his father. But now, an idea appeared in the prince's mind. Why did the gods perish? Gosh, could it be that his father was tired of living? That was not right. The problem of faith could not be stopped, other than reincarnation or stripping away the faith. But was there another possibility? His father had found a way to stop it, but he did not say it, forcing all the gods to reincarnate and go into seclusion. Otherwise, how could he marry the goddess of life? TSK. It was hard to imagine that his father would take advantage of the situation. William did not know what kind of complicated feelings his mother had when she had awakened her memory. But ever since she excitedly charged into the impassable continent to save him, I reckon that her complicated feelings were about to explode. You even explained to me that he and my father were connected. I did not believe you, you old man. You are very bad. But come to think of it, I was really an accident. William suddenly felt like crying. But after they had returned, their feelings for each other seemed to have improved. Oh, perhaps his mother was really touched by his father. In addition, what was done was done. He even had a son now, so his mother had no other choice. But William thought of another problem. Why did his father call himself the god of fate? Of course, it was because the god of fate did not have a name. He was only in charge of the fates of the gods. The god of fate was in charge of the fates of all living creatures. William understood a principle. Why had his father uncontrollably absorbed everyone's karmic luck back then? That was probably a way to collect the origin of fate. Or rather, he had changed the origin of fate into the origin of fate. Hence, the situation was somewhat out of control. It was only when he became a sage that it was completely stabilized. In that case, has his father already become a saint of fate? Gosh, if that was the case, his father's plan was not small. Chapter 605. The River of Time once again exerted unimaginable power. William was once again pulled into the sky, continuing to be an outsider as he watched the changes in the world of gods. But Odin's avatar did not return. Or rather, after the acceleration of time, William had completely lost control of Odin's avatar. But the connection between them was not completely severed. William knew that Odin was still his avatar. But as time passed, more and more memories appeared in his mind. It was as if Odin's avatar had its own consciousness and was contacting other gods. But he felt that Odin's avatar's actions were similar to his. It was as if his soul had been split into two. William even had an inexplicable feeling. It was that the memories that Odin had given him did not appear out of thin air. Instead, it was as if he had recalled some dust-laden past events. Regarding this point, the prince felt like his head was about to explode. He couldn't imagine what he had experienced at all. Odin was just an avatar, but in his current memories, he seemed to have developed according to the path of the king of gods. Now, he had gathered many gods under him. They were weak gods who did not belong to their respective factions. But even if they could gather these deities together and have a dominant position among them, it was clearly not an easy task. That was right. Odin's avatar's ability to conspire with others was impressive. This made him think of two sentences from Joss. The past had been locked and could never be changed. Joss had also mentioned that the Dream of Eternity scroll seemed to have unparalleled power. It could allow the user to return to the past and do certain things at certain times and places that had been locked. And those things that seemed to be locked, in fact, they could be replaced. Or rather, it was not that William was very strong. Perhaps Odin did not really appear in the mythological era. It was just that the Dream of Eternity scroll was too powerful. It allowed William to travel across the River of Time and change certain things that had been locked down. Or it allowed Odin to replace a dead god who did not have the memories of the gods. As for why this happened, even the River of Time recognized this situation. In fact, it had a lot to do with the reincarnation of the gods and the elimination of faith. In this life, besides facing the goddess of death, William had not come into contact with any other gods. He was also not sure if the goddess of death had a complete memory. But looking at how crazy the goddess of death was, she might have also lost some of her past memories when her faith was removed. Then it had been changed before. The gods had also lost some of their memories. That was why Odin's reappearance as the king of the gods seemed extremely natural. It even reminded them of their long-sealed memories. Maybe that's it. William thought for a long time and could only come to this conclusion. Of course, he also wondered if his rebirth had affected the River of Time. But this involved too many things, and he couldn't find the connection between his rebirth and Odin's clone. So he could only push all the blame onto the Dream of Eternity scroll. Because of this, he could understand why so many deities went to war over this, and why the god of thunder had one of his arms cut off by the sword god. Dream of Eternity. He could return to the past and do something that was beneficial to him. He could even give others the opportunity to step into the God-King realm. Damn it, that was something that many deities dreamed of. Countless deities would fight each other for this, and even a large-scale war between deities would break out. The creator of the Dream of Eternity scroll should be the Lord God of Time, who had become a Lord God. He had used the essence of a time-based god and his own control over the laws of time to create this scroll. William couldn't imagine the difficulty of creating such a scroll. But from Moses' tone, she obviously wouldn't do it. But she knew that this scroll was created by the origin of the time god. In this way, the Lord God of Time could extract a branch of the Styx River. Naturally, the Lord God of Time had unimaginable power, and he might really be able to make some changes to the River of Time. In his previous life, he had used Dream of Eternity. TSK. Perhaps he was a test subject of the Lord God of Time, because at that time, he could only be a bystander, and he didn't have enough power to make any changes. Come to think of it, I seem to be fated with the Lord God of Time. William blinked and glanced at the ring of time on his hand. It was a proposal gift from the Son of Time, but the Son of Time had died. The Son of Time had died? Could the Son of Time be the time god? Gosh, ahem, he didn't dare to think too much. To be honest, he was very curious why the Lord God of Time didn't use this scroll. Could it be that his realm was too high, and the time scroll couldn't bring him back to the past? Or perhaps the Lord God of Time, who was supposed to be immortal, had seen something that made him create Dream of Eternity. Was he trying to make some changes to the timeline? However, William definitely wouldn't know, because no one knew who the reincarnation of the Lord God of Time was in his previous life. He couldn't ask even if he wanted to. Of course, all of these were William's deductions. As for time continued to pass. Wars between gods would also occur frequently. But most of the time, the gods would maintain their high and mighty status, and it was usually their believers who expressed their dissatisfaction. The gods were too powerful, under the situation where no race had a sage. All the living creatures of the intelligent races, from the moment they were born, their lives didn't belong to them. They spent their lives fighting for the gods, for their own interests, goals, hatred, and even for the entertainment of some gods. The power made the gods gradually lose themselves. There were more and more crazy gods. The gods' continent also became more and more chaotic, especially the gods who were born on the dark side of the gods' continent, the dark world. They were dissatisfied with the god of light, the sun god, and the god of thunder who regarded themselves as orthodox. They were even angry that the dark world was reduced to a rubbish dump. At this moment, the first darkness invasion occurred. From then on, the world of the gods was divided into the gods' continent and the dark continent. Their hostility towards each other continued until the fourth era. Killing. Endless killing and war. The gods were still so high and mighty. They even discovered a problem. If they launched a war, they only needed to use a miracle to erupt with pure faith, and their power would continue to increase. Hence, a bloody war that lasted for thousands of years appeared. The races of the two worlds were pawns. They constantly killed to provide pure faith to the gods. The gods were constantly becoming stronger. But the intelligent races continued to grow into a civilization through killing. Because as long as there was a confrontation, there would be people who wanted to become stronger, create more powerful force, and defeat the other party. But there was civilization. They also began to have doubts. They did not understand why there was such endless killing. They did not understand why, as an intelligent race, they only had the goal of fighting for the gods. But the gods, they were their gods. They were their faith. They were high and mighty. From countless historical records, it was the gods who created them. It was the gods who allowed them to live a carefree life, making them more and more powerful. They did not dare to resist the gods. They could only silently bear the death brought by the endless war. Until an elf successfully stepped into the saint state. A saint, the first saint among billions of intelligent races. This elf was surprised to find that he had the combat power comparable to that of the gods. He could easily use all kinds of miracles of the gods. He exploded with nature-defying combat power on the battlefield. Wherever he went, all the enemies could not match him. He felt it. He was God, an invincible God. He was received by the gods. At that time, he also knew that the gods were just a group of overly powerful creatures. The aura of this group of gods was stronger than his because they had been in this realm for too long. The gods invited him to become a member of the gods, and let him join this game that belonged to the gods. This saint realized that something was wrong. Their mentality was different from his. Their purpose of starting the war was only for the sake of faith and to make themselves stronger. They regarded all living creatures as nobodies. They did not care about the life and death of the intelligent races. The El Saint did not want to do that. He burst out with opposition. He prayed to his faith, the goddess of life, to help him to resolve the war between the two worlds. It was a pity. The goddess of life was also helpless. In the end, the elven saint disappeared. With his death, the opposing voices that had just been raised disappeared once again. However, during this period of time, there was finally a god who stepped into the level of the Lord God. That was the Lord God of Time. He suspended the war and started a meeting of the gods again. Hence, William was fortunate enough to appear in the middle of the round seat meeting. The accelerated time, flow, stopped again, and he saw that Odin's clone had also regained control over him. But what was very impressive was that Odin's clone now had the combat ability of a peak god, because, in his additional memories, Odin began to absorb faith from his heart and participated in the war between the two worlds when he could not change the situation. TSK. This was not in line with William's idea of treating living creatures as nobodies. But the situation was like this, and he could not change it. He could only go along with it, especially since he was a warmonger. He had gained a lot from this war, establishing the foundation for him to become the king of gods. Or rather, this was something that had already happened in the long river of time. He was powerless to change it, and the Lord God of Time saw him again. He even smiled at him, intentionally or unintentionally. Yes, this guy has become a Lord God and can really see me. He should already know everything. William's mouth twitched. He was not worried. Anyway, he was dragged here by this guy. He only needed to sit and watch. He did not need to think too much. Lord God. This word represented everything in this time period. It represented unparalleled power. Just like the Pope of Light in the current God's continent, he could easily command the masses. No one dared to defy such an existence. The Lord God of Time gave many suggestions. For example, he wanted them to see if their personalities had changed. At this moment, the gods who were immersed in the massacre had a slight change in expression. Yes, they were getting crazier. They were actually affected by faith. They realized that faith had a greater and greater influence on them. They wanted to step into the Lord God realm as soon as possible so that they could have a chance to control the problem of faith. But the more anxious they were, the more they were affected by faith. It even made them start a continent war at all costs so that they could collect more faith. Actually, many of them were already close to breaking through to the Lord God realm. But the Lord God of Time was the fastest. And as the Lord God of Time continued to discuss, the God of Space suddenly sneered. Time, do you want us to not start a war and monopolize the throne after you become a Lord God yourself? You're thinking too much. Yes, I remember that you also had a lot of fun in the Continent War. Otherwise, do you really think you can easily become a Lord God? The Lord God of Time faced the unfriendly gazes of the crowd. He did not fear them, nor did he use his combat power to make them submit, because they were all gods, and they were truly of the same race. They even shared a common language, especially since the Lord God of Time seemed to see many things through the river of time. He just said softly, I have no interest in stopping you from becoming a Lord God. I just want you to understand that faith has become a poison. Even becoming a Lord God cannot completely cure it. What? The God's expressions changed. The Lord God of Time continued. That is the truth. The main reason why I want you to stop the war is because too many living beings from both continents have died. If this continues, it will not be beneficial for you to become a Lord God. The God's expressions changed slightly. They did not understand what the Lord God of Time's goal was. If becoming a Lord God could not solve the problem of faith, then why would you be so kind as to let us become Lord Gods as soon as possible? William raised his eyebrows. He seemed to have thought of something. He controlled Odin and asked, You want us to become Lord Gods so that we can find a way out? For example, reincarnation and cultivation of the perfected divine path. Or You can gather the power of many Lord gods and find a way to control the faith, or even safely eliminate it. The Lord God of Time looked at Odin with admiration. He said in a low voice, "That's right. Only by gathering the power of all the gods can we find a way out. What do you think?" Rogers expressionlessly twitched his mouth. He said with a mournful expression, "Yes, we are doomed. The mythological era is about to become a thing of the past. You have to work hard and find a new way out." The gods were expressionless. "MMP, are you sure about that?" But the truth was that was it. When the first Lord God appeared in the mythological era, it was determined that the future gods would die. A new path. It also represented a new life. And the new life of the gods was the fourth era. Prince William rolled his eyes. He looked up at the sky and did not know what to think. Chapter 606. The meeting of the gods ended. Time sped up uncontrollably again. It was getting faster and faster. It was so fast that William could not accept too much information. Except for a few shocking scenes that he remembered, his brain selectively filtered out everything else. As more and more gods became main gods, Odin was also unwilling to fall behind and stepped into this realm, becoming the king of gods. As for why he dared to use this title, this was because he had taken in a bunch of random gods. However, he had the largest number of gods among all the factions of gods. The other Lord gods did not want to start a war between the Lord gods, so they could only tolerate his overconfidence. Then, time sped up again. It was so fast that William could not remember anything. Just like when he used the Dream of Eternity scroll, the exciting scenes of the era flashed before his eyes like a slideshow. Then, time passed. He wanted to return to the timeline that he should be in. It was easy to go to the past, and it should be easy to return to the present. But after he changed the timeline, it would not be easy to go back alive. He was like a small boat in the river of time, and the boat could capsize at any time. The space around him trembled incessantly, as if countless mountains were crushing him from all directions. William could clearly feel the intense crisis of changing the timeline. This was the backlash of the river of time. But the Dream of Eternity scroll was still protecting him, and there was always a time barrier in front of him. No matter how strong the external pressure was, he could not break through it. His Royal Highness was no longer worrying over nothing. He just sat quietly in the void and slowly closed his eyes. He could live or die. It was all because of this tremble. No matter how much he thought, there was no other way. He could only pray that the scroll of the Lord God of Time was powerful enough. He did not know how long had passed. Maybe it was an instant. Maybe it was decades. Crack! A crisp sound awakened William, who was in a deep sleep. The invisible bubble in front of him suddenly burst. Just when William thought that he was going to be in big trouble, he opened his eyes. Everything was peaceful again. He returned to the Temple of Time. But at this moment, crazy memories suddenly rushed into his brain, giving him a splitting headache. Blood flowed out of his orifices, and he fell to the ground involuntarily. His body began to twitch. This was none other than the memory that Odin had given him after so many years. Odin's clone. He had completely solidified his identity as the king of gods. As for the current Odin, of course, it was still Odin, who was a mid-tier deity from the Middle-earth continent. There was no change in his divinity value. However, his battle prowess was greatly enhanced. This was because he had the experience of stepping into the Lord level, and he had acquired certain skills related to the divine spirit and Lord level. He also had some extra talents. But I've made a killing. The Dream of Eternity scroll is too powerful. William coughed up blood and stood up with difficulty. His eyes were shining. He didn't know how many Dream of Eternity scrolls there were. However, he knew that in this timeline, he would definitely be considered a relatively crucial figure. However, was Odin's clone more important? Or was he more important now? Is it possible that my own importance is greater? For example, the talent of Goddess of Beauty? William narrowed his eyes and pondered for a while. To a certain extent, the endowment Face God could display extraordinary performance. The specialty of the Goddess of Beauty was not her battle prowess, but her charm. It could be said that, As long as William didn't do anything too excessive to those creatures who had developed a favorable impression of him in the future, they wouldn't be able to develop any hatred towards him. Their favorable impression of him would only become higher and higher, and it would even affect their own personalities. The City of Dawn, the East Sea Metropolis, the Beast Citadel, and the 5 cities of the Desert Sea. All of his territories, as long as they were his people, almost all of them would restrain their character to a certain extent, if William was said to be a warmonger. But the happiness index of the civilians in his territory was far higher than that of other forces. It could even be said that, if the era Lord of the Fourth Era was really a certain person, as long as William became the Era Lord, and the so-called war, chaos, slaughter, and evil would completely disappear because of his innate talent, peace. A true heaven, fairyland, and Garden of Eden would really rise from this land full of killing. Subsequently, William left the Temple of Time. He wanted to verify something. In the Magic Tower, when Moses saw William again, her gaze changed. She could not help but look at him curiously. She could not help but ask, "You went back?" "Yes, you almost saw me." Yes, that inexplicable sense of familiarity and memory suddenly surged into my mind. Moses recalled the meeting of the gods. She felt an inexplicable and familiar gaze that seemed to be looking at her. Thinking of this, Moose actually felt a little shy. It was like a girlfriend who forgot to put on makeup before going out. She was afraid that William would not see her best side. But come to think of it, Mo seemed to be really lazy at the meeting of the gods. He did not say anything. He just sprawled on the table and slept soundly. It was obvious that he did not care about the meeting of the gods. Your clone, Odin, is really a prime god. She sighed with emotion again. Actually, I don't understand. Odin is clearly my avatar. He is an avatar that was created through various methods. It can even be said that, if not for so many coincidences, Odin would not have become my avatar. How did he become a Lord God? Did he become a Lord God first? Or did he become my avatar first? William asked with a puzzled expression. Moses, who was dressed in a snow-white magic cannon, sat cross-legged. Her long skirt wrapped around her round and slender thighs. The faintly exposed calves were very alluring. She chuckled and said, "If you have to find a starting point, you can't start from your body. It's the scroll of dream of eternity." The scroll of dream of eternity that Elder Time created was actually because he found some loopholes in the river of time. When he created this scroll, the timeline had already changed. Those so-called fixed things will change when someone uses the scroll of dream of eternity. As for the loopholes in the river of time, it's the memory loss caused by the reincarnation of the gods and seclusion. Actually, from the looks of it, Elder Time is quite capable. William stole a glance at the goddess's long legs and could not help but move closer. Moses did not know what he was thinking. She continued in a deep voice. Elder Time is the first existence among the gods to step into the Lord God realm. He rarely makes a move, and his strength is unfathomable. No one has a deeper understanding of the river of time than him. Don't you know all types of magic? William could not help but ask. Moses rolled her eyes. That's right. You also know that it's called magic. But that doesn't mean that I control all the origin power. Ever since I was born, my talent allowed me to easily control all types of magic. However, every element and origin power gave birth to a corresponding god. More importantly, Elder Time was born in the river of time. It's obviously a little unrealistic for me to compete with him in terms of control over time. The goddess of magic noticed that William was deep in thought with his head lowered. She thought that he did not understand, so she continued. Let's put it this way. I can easily control magic of the same level, but the power of rules at a deeper level is no longer magic. I can't do it unless I can step into a higher realm. William shifted his gaze away from the long legs. He swallowed and nodded. I see. I understand. I understand. Smack! Moses gritted her teeth and slapped the back of his head. I know that you're up to no good. I'm talking to you nicely. Can't you focus? William scratched his head and said innocently, No, but you can't master the power of rules. Won't you be at a disadvantage when fighting with those people? I know all types. Do you know all types? Even if I can't completely borrow the power of rules, when I use all types of magic. Even if the other main gods use their strongest power of rules, they can't defeat me. It can even be said that apart from the master gods of space, the master gods of time, the god of the underworld, and the god of death, most of the master gods are not my match. Moses rolled his eyes and ignored him with a huff. William discovered that his powerful girlfriend was angry again, so he quickly comforted her. He did not want to be beaten up all day. Fortunately, he had an extremely handsome face, and soon his little goddess was no longer angry. At this moment, Moses spoke again. I'm about to step into the sage state. If there are no accidents, I'll leave to break through. Be careful in the city of dawn. Where are you going? The place where you were born? William asked curiously. Moses looked at him deeply. Yes, the place where I was born. The place where magic awakened. William was dumbfounded. He suddenly understood. The main gods were not only born from the rules, but they were also born from the source of rules. This widened the gap between the main gods and the ordinary gods, especially the magic of all types. Moses did not have any concerns about how much magic power he would need to expend at the same time. William finally understood. It turned out that Moses was born from endless magic. This was also the key reason why she could control all types of magic. But there was a goddess of magic among the gods. Was there also a god of battle energy? A god of battle energy? A god of battle energy who was proficient in all types of battle energy? Moses seemed to understand his thoughts and rolled his eyes. Are you crazy? A source can only give birth to a natural god with the potential of a main god. The source of battle energy and magic are the same. I could choose to train in battle energy or magic, but I chose magic in the end. TSK, that's true. The goddess of magic sounds more normal. The goddess of battle energy sounds a little out of place. William nodded thoughtfully. Ding dong. The transmission scroll beeped. William almost tore it apart. But when he read Lancelot's description, his expression changed. The war at the Dark Outpost was about to begin. Chapter 607. William had planned to participate in this mission after resolving the sea monster crisis. But the task of the outpost in the Dark World was much earlier than expected. Of course, in the eyes of the Supreme Pontiff of Light, the sea monster crisis at the coastal areas of the legendary continent was just a prelude to the third darkness invasion. He had not even taken off his clothes. How could his attention be on this? Moses had to attain the sage state. Though he did not know how long it would take, it was going to be an eventful period. He did not know how long it would take for Moses to attain the sage state. After all, they did not have the data panel. They might need to go into seclusion to attain the sage state. But 3 months was enough. By then, the city of dawn would be safe. Even if a peak sage attacked, there would be no need to worry. According to the current combat power of Moses and Odin's avatar, a normal peak sage could not defeat them. But the situation is not good. The signs of the gods' arrival have appeared. I wonder when the gods will appear. Or if they have appeared, they are hiding in the dark. William sighed. Lancelot had sent him a message. Not only did he tell him to head to the Temple of Light, but he also told him that there were signs of the gods' arrival. But the situation in the gods' continent was very complicated. The sages were the beings who controlled the world. Even if the gods descended, they would not be too arrogant and show their miracles. Even if they dared to show their divinity, they would not go overboard. They would probably be like Odin and take advantage of the imperialists. But the gods, they were very different. They were too powerful. Of course, the true power of the Supreme Pontiff of Light was also unimaginable, because he was the first supreme sage since the birth of the gods' continent. As for the divine path, it had existed since the mythological era. However, the first era, the second era, and the third era had lasted until the end of the third era before a transcendent saint had appeared. Not only did he carry the luck of the human race, but he also carried the great luck of many other intelligent races. If there was a main character in the gods' continent, the Supreme Pontiff of Light had to be one of them, and he was a very important one, because he represented the flag of the rebellion against the gods. He would not die. The gods would not dare to enslave the intelligent creatures. William did not think too much. After bidding farewell to Moses, He hurriedly entered the teleportation portal and went to the Temple of Light. William walked in from the main entrance and saw the 1,000-meter statue of the God of Light. The shield and long sword in his hands gave him a very familiar feeling. William laughed in his heart and sighed. You didn't expect this, did you? My clone is at the same level as you. William, you're here too? Ackler greeted him from afar. He seemed a little surprised, but not too surprised. Of course. How can the city of Dawn miss out on building an outpost in the Dark World? By the way, Chaos City is also participating? Acarlo nodded. Yes, my father wanted me to participate. He said that this mission concerns the fate of the God's continent. Anyone with a bit of foresight shouldn't reject the Radiant Temple's invitation. William's lips twitched. He thought, if it weren't for the fact that the Radiant Pope became an overgod in advance and gave you guys enough courage, why would you even participate? This wasn't him saying that the primal Chaos City Master was a little cowardly. It was just that he was too good at hiding. Of course, it wasn't his fault. The Master of the City of Chaos had been stuck at the peak of the legendary realm for tens of thousands of years. He still hoped to step into the Saint Realm and show off. Naturally, he didn't want to fall because of some war. At the same time, William saw many familiar faces, as well as familiar forces. Among them, the three empires were the more impressive ones. They had sent sages and many legendary experts to participate in this meeting. It was obvious that they attached great importance to the outpost. Or rather, the three empires attached great importance to the Radiant Pope. There was no need to think about it. With the Radiant Pope guarding the legendary continent, it was obviously much more stable than the other continents. Even if the overgods descended to the mortal world, the legendary continent wouldn't be prematurely attacked. The three human empires had the widest territory, and they were the direct beneficiaries. Now that their leader had a mission, they naturally had to perform well. When the time came, the Radiant Pope would take care of them. In fact, when the Radiant Temple was expanding its power, it could be discovered. The three empires had provided many talented youths. Currently, no one knew how many temple knights and priests there were in the Radiant Temple. Among these three sages, there were also two familiar faces. Grigory, the metal controller of the war-ending empire. Ike, the ice ranger of the Frost Empire. The sage of the Sunset Empire was a wood element sage. Outsiders had long forgotten his name. They only knew that he was called Tree Grandmaster. However, William discovered an old legendary acquaintance. It was the magic college principal of the Frost Empire, the time Grand Enchanter Kieran. William was frantically looking at him from afar. He wanted him to come over and chat with him, but the little old man pretended not to see him. He looked straight ahead and followed Ike into the distance. Tisk, did you go crazy after spending 5 years in the Snow Elves' kingdom? The corners of William's mouth twitched. Kieran was Old Leather's mentor, but he didn't give him face. As the prince and Ackler walked inside, Roland's eyes widened. They also met more and more familiar faces. The top chambers of commerce in the 4 regions of the north, south, east, and west had also participated in this mission. William could not help but exclaim in surprise. Indeed, they were everywhere that had business opportunities. But when William met this group of people, it was inevitable that he would have to interact with them. There was no choice. The magical weapons of the City of Dawn were too powerful. This group of Beastra's stars had put in all their effort, but not only were they unable to crack them, they had also lost a lot of manpower and resources. It was a huge loss. Therefore, they were thinking of investing in the Dawn Magical Weapon Chamber of Commerce. William could not reject this group of people who wanted to split the profits. He could only laugh and say that he would consider it. When he turned around, he saw President Forbes, who was standing on his shoulder. The two of them smiled and greeted each other. Then Forbes, who was on Forbes' shoulder, kept muttering, I'm finally getting used to this body. But many people were tired of listening to him, and they no longer had that strange expression. They were just puzzled. Why was this old man so immature? The 3 elven teams also came. This time, it was Bernice who led the team to discuss. As for when they would enter the Dark World, it might not be her. William exchanged a glance with him and didn't say anything. The relationship between the City of Dawn and the elves was not very close, especially after his father had beaten up the Dawn King, an elven sage. William had not had much contact with the elves. Although the affinity between the two camps had not dropped to the freezing point, it was not as close as before. William had thought of putting down his pride to ease the relationship between the two sides. But if William really did that, he would not only be humiliating himself, but his father. Next, many forces gradually entered the venue. William saw almost all the high-level and top forces in the legendary continent, including the representatives of the dwarves and the Seraphin. There were a lot of sages present. There were 13 of them. There were even more legendary professionals. There were close to 100 of them. In this ring-shaped table that was similar to the meeting of the gods, the seats of the 13 sages were definitely the best. But William was not bad either. He was next to the deputy leader of the mercenary guild, who was also Sacred Shield Brooks. On the other side was Akeler. Obviously, in the eyes of the Temple of Light, the status of the City of Chaos was second only to the 4 top forces. If the Lord of the City of Chaos became a sage, his status would be even more impressive. And at this time, the venue was already full, but the person in charge of the Light Palace had not come out yet. So at this time, the venue was also quite noisy. Everyone was discussing, as if they were discussing how to act, and even those who were in a better state of mind began to argue about the distribution of benefits. Lancelot appeared, but he was only a legendary and a guide. He led the guests to their seats, but he did not dare to speak loudly. He was afraid that he would be hammered to the point that he could not take care of himself. Even his father, the god of light, could not save him. But soon, someone appeared in the center of the venue. In the next moment, the venue instantly quieted down. But when everyone glanced at him, some of the sages started to discuss again. They did not give face to the deputy leader of the mercenary guild. Therefore, Ursula was furious. He immediately shouted, "What are you arguing about? Do you think this is your family's market? The Pope has gone to another place for a meeting. I am the only one in the legendary continent. If you do not want to participate, leave now. But don't blame me if that fool comes to your house." The 13 sages rolled their eyes. They were here for the Pope of Light. Why didn't you say that you were the host of this meeting? Wouldn't it be better if we sent a few legendary professionals here? Fortunately, the venue finally quieted down. They could not give face to Ursula, but they had to give face to the Pope. Ursula heaved a sigh of relief. He then said with a serious expression, "The legendary continent is in charge of 10 outposts. The other 6 continents are also in charge of 10 outposts. We have to attack at the same time. We have to catch them off guard, so that the King of Darkness will not be able to provide support in time. 10 outposts." The holy angel guarding the legendary continent, Killian, could not help but raise his eyebrows. "Are you sure you're talking about 10 outposts? 10 outposts." Someone raised his eyebrows. "Each outpost will be guarded by at least 1 sage, and another sage will be in charge of the battle. This is not a small number." "That's right. How many sages are there in the legendary continent?" Ursula raised his eyebrows. "Don't talk about these useless things. Even if there are 10 outposts, it means that the legendary continent will have to send at least 20 sages. As for how many sages there are in the legendary continent, you should know. I'm talking about the humans, elves, and winged people." The 13 sages quietened down, but many legendary experts in the venue inhaled a breath of cold air. This was too much, wasn't it? If there were 20 sages in a continent, then there would be 140 sages in 7 continents. Gosh, the Pope of Light was awesome. Just 1 outpost was enough to command all the sages. He said that they would do it immediately. From his tone, it seemed that he would not allow anyone to refuse. William was not too concerned about this. He only wanted to know which sage he was going to follow. Hence, after Ursula saw that no one in the venue raised any objections, he began to assign the 10 outposts to the various forces. Chapter 608. Ursula saw that everyone was unhappy, especially the saints of the human empires and the winged race. They understood what the Holy Father of Light meant. Now, the 2 races had the most saints. It was imaginable that there would be 20 saints in 10 outposts. 10 of the saints will be divided between the two races. But the deputy temple master said calmly, the 3 human empires, Sunset Empire and Frost Empire, will be in charge of 3 outposts. You will have to assign at least 6 saints. The winged race saint's mouth twitched. Obviously, they had underestimated the Holy Father of Light. Ursula's next words indicated that the winged race would also be in charge of 3 outposts, excluding 6 saints. Then, Ursula continued, the 3 elven races will be in charge of 1 outpost. 2 saints. Bernice wanted to reject and say that there were only 3 saints in the 3 elven races. Unfortunately, Ursula gave her a look that said, don't lie to me. The Holy Father of Light seemed to know a lot. He asked Ursula to say it himself, but the other forces looked at her deeply. They wanted to know how many saints were hidden in the 3 elven races. As for the dwarf race, Ursula couldn't help but twitch his mouth. The dwarf race in the legendary continent was really pitiful. There was only 1 saint left. Hence, he coughed lightly and continued, you guys can send some legendary professionals and provide some equipment and resources. Is that all right? Odom was now the representative of the dwarf race. He didn't dare to ignore Ursula. He could only say in a low voice, no problem. Now there are 3 outposts left. Why don't the top forces distribute them among yourselves? Bring out the saints who are hiding in the dark. Ursula suddenly laughed. The meeting place was silent. But McLean suddenly said, my mentor, the White Robe Knight, will be here. He will be in charge of the battles. All right, since the White Robe Knight is here, the Mercenary Guild will be in charge of 1 outpost with him. Holy Shield Brooks chuckled. Ursula rolled his eyes. You have the title of the strongest shield warrior in the legendary continent, but now you have to guard your home. Aren't you embarrassed? I really want to slap your face. But no one said anything. But now, the 3 empires, the Elven Kingdom, and the Winged Race had all sent out their saints. Only the Palace of Darkness and the City of Dawn remained silent. Everyone turned to look at the Dark God and the Lord of the City of Dawn. The former narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, my Palace of Darkness will be in charge of an outpost alone. Many legendary professionals gasped. The Palace of Darkness was still very strong. Besides the Palace Master of the Palace of Darkness, they actually had another saint. Of course, even though the Palace of Darkness claimed to be in charge of an outpost, that was only for the saints. Many of the soldiers had to be mobilized from other places. Even so, it was enough to show that the hidden Trevally of the Palace of Darkness was definitely not weak. But then again, the professionals of the Palace of Darkness were all dark element, and they were like fish in water in the world of darkness. The combat power they could display was far stronger than that of other professionals. However, the Mercenary Palace was not particular. They clearly had 2 saints, yet they still wanted to share responsibility for an outpost with the White Robe Knight. But things had come to this. The prince was dumbfounded. What the F***CK? Are you trying to trick me? My father is not at home. Odin is going to guard Asgard in the Middle-earth continent. You want the City of Dawn to be in charge of an outpost alone? Wouldn't the Lord of Darkness beat you up? Therefore, the prince's face darkened. He looked up at the sky and did not say a word. Ursula saw his expression and coughed lightly. Everyone knows that William's father is carrying out a mission in the fantasy continent. Are there any idle sages who can come and help? Actually, just 1 sage is enough. After all, the Lord of the City of Dawn has the combat power of a sage. He is equivalent to a sage. William vomited blood in his heart. If not for the fact that he could not defeat the sly old fox, he would have caught him and beaten him up. The various forces looked at each other in silence. They pretended not to see anything. This was not a matter of good relations. No matter how powerful the transactions were, there was a possibility that the sages would die in battle. No force wanted to bear this risk. If not for the pressure from the Holy Father of Light, they would not have wanted to pay such a high price. The hall was silent for a full 3 minutes. Ursula could only shrug and helplessly look at William. He said in a deep voice, then there's no other way. I'll be in charge of the sages at the 10th outpost. William, will the City of Dawn have any problems? William was taken aback. He did not expect Ursula to be involved. He could not help but ask, are you in charge of guarding the outpost? Or, of course I'm in charge of guarding the outpost. I'm also in charge of contacting the many sages at the 10 outposts. I don't have the time to fight everywhere. As for the battle against the Dark Army, I'll leave it to you. After all, everyone knows how the City of Dawn thrives. What is the saying of the traveling bard in the legendary continent? As long as the City of Dawn is involved in war, the others will have to stand aside. Once he said this, William's face turned red. The sages of the other forces laughed out loud. The legendary experts were trying to hold back their laughter. It cannot be helped. William had made up the words of the traveling bard in an attempt to expand the influence of the City of Dawn in the legendary continent. In the end, the City of Dawn had suffered a setback. Ursula laughed and said, "By the way, the City of Chaos will join the mercenary guild in charge of the outpost. There's only one Knight of Light, so we'll need some reinforcements." Aquila nodded nonchalantly. It did not matter which outpost it was. The City of Chaos had many soldiers, but it was not considered top force. Odom suddenly said, "The dwarf race is unable to send the sages to battle. Then we'll send our troops to the 10th outpost. We'll also try our best to take care of the equipment and resources at the 10th outpost." Okay, Ursula nodded. Next, Ursula started to assign tasks to the various chambers of commerce. He ensured that each outpost had sufficient support and resources. The chambers of commerce were not weak. They also had to send in some of their troops. After all, they wanted to share the resources of the Dark World. They could not just provide some resources and leave it at that. Another 3 hours passed. While everyone was discussing, the various forces tried their best to determine the details of the distribution of the outposts. This was to prevent any disputes. As for the locations of the outposts, Ursula did not specify. He only asked the various forces to build 3 large space doors. When the time was right, there would be people to help connect to the locations of the Dark World. Why were there 3? Of course, it was because when they were building the outposts, they might encounter a large-scale counterattack from the Dark Forces. They might even be killed by the Dark Forces and destroy the space doors. Naturally, they had to make more preparations. However, the possibility of this happening was very small. After all, the first to fight would definitely be the sages, legendary, and epic experts. If they were really defeated, there was only one possibility. They had been ambushed. The sages, legendary, and epic experts would either die a tragic death or be trapped and unable to guard the teleportation portal. And this kind of thing was not impossible. Because they did not know which sages had already defected to the enemy, the meeting had not ended. Because some trivial details had to be discussed, many people started to look for William to try and buy enough mana gatling. After all, when facing the Dark Army, there was no more powerful weapon than the mana gatling. After William received a large number of orders, he pondered and looked at Ursula. He had used his insight. Besides the name, everything else was a question mark. But what does this old guy mean? William raised his eyebrows. Ursula was not a simple person. Many players had discussed this in William's previous life. But how strong was Ursula? Actually, no one really had a definite answer. Ursula had been the deputy temple lord of the Temple of Light for more than 10,000 years. No one had seen him fight before, because the ones who really fought were the popes of light. Ursula had appeared many times, but every time, he only talked. He did not fight even once. But this time, he's guarding the outpost in the Dark World. He can't possibly not fight at all, right? William stroked his chin. Unless the 10th outpost won't attract the attacks of the Dark Lords. Gosh, it's not impossible. This scoundrel should be very strong. He might even be a peak sage expert. Ordinary Dark Lords don't want to die, so they naturally don't dare to appear in front of him. William pondered for a while and did not think too much. He glanced at the information panel. The mission had appeared. Prelude to the counterattack of the Gods' Continent. The Popes of Light will work together with the various forces of the Gods' Continent to set up 70 outposts in the Dark World. The City of Dawn, the Temple of Light, the City of Chaos, and the dwarfs of the legendary continent will be responsible for guarding the 10th outpost. Mission difficulty, SSS. Mission objective, build an invincible city in the Dark World and use it as an outpost in the Dark World. Mission reward, 5 to 10 billion experience points. Mission reward. Unknown. 100% completion rate means 10 billion experience points. If I can achieve this goal, I will definitely become a sage. But it's a little difficult. Fortunately, the Temple of Light is in charge of the 10th outpost. It should be relatively easy, right? William knew that the Temple of Light was rich. Lancelot, his comrade, was going to fight alongside him again. But then again, the Temple of Light was fierce. The Pope of Light was also strong enough. But this mission was initiated by the Temple of Light. Perhaps the counterattack of the dark forces would be stronger. D***MN. I can only hope that Ursula will be more quick-witted. Resources are not important. The most important thing is to stay away from the territories of the Dark Lords. William silently prayed. He hoped that the goddess of luck would give face to his old friend. Just as the meeting was about to end, a voice, it was like the power of rules. Instantly, it spread throughout the gods' continent. It reverberated in the minds of all the legendary professionals. Is 20 sages a lot? Do we need to discuss for so long? D***MN. I'm a super sage. I've spent so much effort to contact you just to build some outposts and obtain some of the continent's fate so that you can have the opportunity to enter the dark world. But you don't want my respect. All right, before the Lord of Light descends, I'll crush you bunch of old farts. Yes, I'm scolding all of you. I also want to tell you that you're trash. Vermin of the gods' continent. A bunch of idiots who don't know that a war of extinction is about to happen. Are you so naive? Or do you only care about race and power? The gods have descended. It's time to enslave you. Do you know that only one Lord of Light descends to deal with all of you? If any of you don't believe me, bring at least 300 sages. I'll wait for you at the Temple of Light. No need for more, just 3 moves. You won't die. My soul will enter the Styx. D***MN. If I don't show my prowess, do you really think that I'm not invincible? In an instant, the meeting hall was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. It was no wonder that the Pope of Light was not here. It turned out that some troublesome fellows needed him to shout at them before they would obediently take action. But it had to be said, this move would be ridiculed by the entire continent. Stop talking. 2 words. Impressive. But the words of the Pope of Light would infuriate many people. But it did scare many sages, because if a Lord of Light could defeat all the sages, gosh, if this was true, it would be terrible. A sense of urgency rose. Chapter 609. When the Supreme Pontiff of Light displayed his majesty, all the sages submitted to him. Whether they were convinced or not, they were all convinced on the surface. No one dared to say that they wanted to challenge him to a duel. Of course, the sages did not submit to him. They were just following their hearts. After all, they could endure for a while. The more they thought about it, the angrier they got. They had to reach the sage realm before they could regain their dignity. Therefore, everything was carried out in an orderly manner and in full swing. The preparations of the various forces had to be completed within a month. Under this extreme pressure, the entire God's continent became peaceful, which they had not seen for a long time. No one knew the coordinates of the teleportation portal when the attack was launched. The Supreme Pontiff of Light would inform all the factions to launch an attack on the Dark World at the same time. This was to prevent any accidents from happening. The huge machine that was the City of Dawn began to operate in full swing. Space rings were filled with magical beast meat, water, and ordinary rations. They were distributed to the quartermasters. There were 18 million civilians in William's territory. Among them, there were 2 million professionals, 3 million regular soldiers, and 700,000 NPC mercenaries. Naturally, the players who were not present were not included. At least half of the soldiers, 3 legendary professionals, and 20 epic experts. William made a decision after pondering for a while. Of the 1 million soldiers, he decided to let the regular soldiers and the mercenaries take up 500,000 each. He had no choice. The regular soldiers were his favorite. They had a higher bloodline potential. Although the Dawn mercenaries were loyal to him, they were weaker than the regular soldiers in terms of training and combat power. William did not want to use all his trump cards in this mission. Of course, The legendary Dragonblood Legion would definitely participate in the battle. They were invincible. They would go wherever there was a problem. When William entered the magic tower again, he saw the letter and a large pile of scrolls left behind by Moses. Obviously, Goddess Moses had left. She was only one step away from the Sage Realm. She was about to break through, but he did not know how long it would take. William glanced at the little witch who was in charge of guarding the magic tower. He walked over with a smile and looked down. It was not that he wanted to look, but it was too big, and Moses was not around. When the blood moon, which saw his expression, she clenched her small fists and took a few steps back nervously. When she leaned against the wall and could no longer move back, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Master, please take pity on me, Bah." He looked at the little witch, who was clutching her forehead and crying in pain. He said, "You only know how to think all day. Don't think that I don't know that you want to trick me at any time. But don't stay at the magic tower and watch. Sia will guard the magic tower for you. You'll follow me to the dark world." The blood moon little witch looked at him pitifully, as if she didn't want to go. But His Royal Highness said, "Don't give me that look. Let me tell you, there are many creatures with blood in the dark world. There are countless of them. Think about it. If you devour millions of creatures, will you be able to step into the legendary realm?" Instantly, the eyes of the blood moon, big-breasted, long-legged witch lit up. She licked her lips evilly and promised that she would go. But now, the little witch was no longer a threat to His Royal Highness. When His Royal Highness saw her licking her lips, he didn't feel evil. He only felt guilty. Fortunately, William had good self-control. He waved his hand and asked her to stay at the side, so that the big white thing would not be an eyesore. Subsequently, after inspecting the iron chain warships on the ocean, William said to Douglet, who had already become a legend, "The outbreak of the beast tide will depend on you and Jack. If there's really something difficult to deal with, then go to the dark world through the portal to find me. Don't worry, Royal Highness." Douglet confidently took out the sea god's trident and said in a deep voice, "I've inherited the sea god's legacy. Coupled with the effects of this divine weapon, my control over the sea is beyond my imagination." Jack also controls Sea Monster Paul, who is at the peak of the legendary realm. In the sea, he can even unleash the power of a sage. As long as there are no sage sea monsters in the beast tide, they won't be able to break through our defense line. William nodded. He stopped thinking about the problems of the coastal cities in the City of Dawn. Then, he went to the alternate dimension where the magical weapon manufacturing factory was, after confirming a series of matters with the person in charge. Thus, he completely distributed the magic energy weapons to all the legions to use. The City of Dawn sent out 1,000,000 soldiers. There were 200 legions with 5,000 soldiers. Each legion had 100 heavy-duty magical Gatling guns, 30 magical annihilation guns, and 30 magic cannons. It could be said that, as long as the Dawn Army had a chance to set up their formation, these 20,000 heavy-duty magical Gatling guns were enough to teach the creatures of the dark world how to behave. They would let them understand that all beings were equal in front of the magical Gatling guns. As long as there were no trump cards comparable to the legendary Dragonblood Legion or unscrupulous legendary experts, no one would be able to charge into the great formation of the City of Dawn. But this was not the most important thing. Among the 200 legions, there were 5 legions that were fully equipped with magical weapons. These legions were made up of cannon gunners. These 5 legions had a total of 5,000 heavy-duty Gatling guns of version 5.0. The portable magical Gatling guns were the standard, and so were the magical annihilation guns. It was simple. These 5 cannon gunner legions were the other trump cards of the City of Dawn. They would be able to display unimaginable might on this battlefield of millions of living beings. This is just the combat power of the City of Dawn. Since I've joined forces with the Temple of Light, they won't be weak. They might even be stronger than the City of Dawn. William narrowed his eyes. He believed that with this level of firepower, even if there were endless dark creatures in all directions, he could still build an outpost there. Unless, don't raise flags. William was still unsure of which legendary experts should be sent to the Dark World. A powerful aura suddenly emanated from the City of Dawn. Metal elements engulfed the entire City of Dawn and revolved around it. William turned his head to take a look. A metal elemental storm had formed, causing the clouds in the sky to turn golden. Countless small metal particles were condensed. Countless people looked up at the sky and at the metal ball that was slowly floating in the sky. Time passed. The metal ball became bigger and bigger. Eventually, it flew up into the clouds and hovered above the City of Dawn like a satellite. Many people exclaimed, "Diablo is about to enter the legendary realm." Diablo is a dual practitioner of battle energy and magic. His aura is very powerful. The commoners prayed for Diablo to successfully enter the legendary realm. A full 3 hours passed. There was a cracking sound. A crack appeared on the seemingly sturdy metal ball. Crack, crack. More and more cracks appeared like a spiderweb. But the satellite-like metal ball did not shatter and fall to the ground. Instead, it began to transform in a strange state. It kept shrinking and condensing until the metal ball, which was 1,000 meters long, transformed into a human figure. In the next moment, a ring-shaped shock wave spread along with the roar. Diablo, who was wearing metal elemental armor, slowly landed on the ground. William was surprised. Diablo, who had been with William since the beginning, was very powerful. When Diablo was an advanced grandmaster and epic warrior, his combat power had always been very strong. But because William was using the cheat code, some of the kids who did not use the cheat code could not keep up with him. That was why Diablo's presence was not as strong. But those who were capable would become successful sooner or later. Even if William did not give him special care, Diablo had still relied on his own abilities to enter the legendary level. It was not easy. It was the first time William had seen such a situation. A professional had used the elemental power when he broke through to the next realm and created an elemental armor for himself. Damn it. Fortunately, it was only a legendary elemental equipment set. It was not as awesome as William's divine equipment set. Otherwise, he would be envious. Burn Cinder, Sarimas, Alfred, Wendy, Legolas, and the others flew over to congratulate Diablo. Diablo was in a good mood. He waved his hand and condensed a large number of disposable metal spears. If he threw them, not only would they have strong penetrative power, but they would also explode. The resulting metal fragments would have the power of a legendary. He gave these small gifts to his old friends. Whale's Violent Dragon, and the others smiled as they received the gifts. William noticed that they had gathered together. He walked over and said, "What do you think about the mission of the Dark Outpost?" "Let's go," everyone said in unison. "It's a little difficult. The City of Dawn can't only have one legendary, Douglet. There have to be at least two." William shook his head. He looked at his subordinates, who looked disappointed. But he still smiled and said, "Don't think that this mission is a good thing. If the previous missions had a 50-50 chance of success, this time, there might be a situation where we fail. Because you know that the Dark World won't care about anything when we fight against them. They won't bully the weak. If the King of Darkness attacks you, it will be difficult for me to stop him. How about this? Sarimas, Burn Cinder, Diablo, and Wendy, the four of you will follow me. At least after the mission of the Dark Outpost is stabilized and the teleportation portal is secured, the rest of you can go." William then pointed out some epic experts who could go to the Dark Outpost. Alfred was a little depressed when he realized that he had not been chosen. Ever since he had joined the City of Dawn, he had discovered the benefits of joining the camp. Now, his loyalty to William had reached 800 plus. He regretted going against the City of Dawn and wanted to show his loyalty. William patted his shoulder and said, "The crisis of the sea monsters has not been resolved. The other cities might also be threatened. Your mission is very important, and you will have a chance to go when the time comes." Just as Alfred was scratching his head, a voice suddenly rang out. Annie flew over on her rainbow pony. She softly said, "I'll go too." William smiled and said, "Okay." Another 45 days passed. The voice of the Supreme Pontiff of Light traveled to their ears. Teleportation portals were opened one by one. The sages were the first to bear the brunt. The legendary experts followed closely behind. Epic Grandmaster, legion after legion, advanced wave after wave. When William entered the dark world, he was about to face the hidden devil army. Daylight appeared. The entire dark world was like a snow-white and warm world. Countless dark creatures hidden in the darkness howled incessantly, and even some low-level dark creatures were turned to dust. The Supreme Pontiff of Light made his move at this moment. He suppressed the entire dark world. Chapter 610. It was as bright as day in the dark world. Countless dark creatures wailed under the light. The legendaries trembled. Their bodies felt as though they had been thrown into a pot of boiling oil. Their skin and flesh were melting. It was not fatal, but it was painful. Although the Dark Lords could resist the holy light, they had to prostrate on the ground. They could only growl like wild beasts to express their dissatisfaction. Main gods, super sages. Once they performed the gods' miracle, there was only one thing that the two continents could do. Tens of thousands of races would submit and worship them. The Supreme Pontiff of Light was using his supreme power to give the sages and legendaries from the gods' continents the best time to attack. He was preventing them from being ambushed. But this godly skill, which could cover the entire dark world, could not be maintained for long. But the holy light shone for 30 seconds. It gave many forces an opportunity. Sages, legendaries, and epic warriors entered the battlefield. Even the trump card legions had charged into the battlefield. 30 seconds later, including William, the City of Dawn had 6 legendaries, 20 epic warriors, and 10 Grandmaster legions who had come to the Dark World. They were less than a kilometer away from the City of Dawn. The Deputy Temple Lord of the Temple of Light, the sage expert Ursula, hovered in the sky. He gazed at the sky as though he was trying to find the enemy that could ambush them. 10 legendary temple knights and pastors were guarding the surroundings to prevent the enemy from attacking. Other than that, there were also a large number of temple knights, priests, and so on. After the armies of both sides appeared in the dark world that was filled with scorching dust, they quickly gathered together under the leadership of the epic-level professionals to prevent the enemy from bullying and slaughtering them. Meanwhile, the great magisters continued to cast spells to buff the army. They also had to reinforce the soil beneath their feet to prevent dark creatures from crawling out of the ground. They immediately threw out countless resources from their spatial rings, as well as ready-made walls, foundations, and so on. Diablo was also helping. He had several space rings that contained metals that were the size of a mountain range. With a wave of his hand, many metal cannons were uprooted from the ground. With the efforts of many legendary and enchanters, the outline of a city was formed within 3 minutes. This kind of unimaginable construction speed could only be truly demonstrated at a time like this. William also flew into the sky. His eye of the thunder flashed with electric arcs, and he quickly understood the surrounding terrain. They were on top of a mountain that was thousands of meters tall. But what was more interesting was that the top of this mountain seemed to have been cut by a saint, causing their position to be like a flat mountain, with a large area of flat terrain. The interior of this pitch-black mountain seemed to be filled with all kinds of rare metals. It was obvious that their outpost was built on a treasure mountain. The prerequisite was that they had to defend this place in order to obtain the resources within. As for the lonely flat-topped mountain, it was surrounded by lava rivers that seemed to form a good defensive environment. But if there was no accident, there would definitely be flame devils appearing in this damned place. 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 35 minutes after the light pope cast holy light illumination, William finally discovered the traces of the Dark Army. It was a dark army formed by countless dark creatures. Countless devils floated in the sky, using their instincts to control the dark creatures to attack the flat-topped mountain range. This time, there were too many things that ordinary people had never seen before in the Dark Army. The bone dragons were so rotten that only their bones were left. They spat out black dragon breath that had unimaginable corrosive power. There were hell giants that were hundreds of meters tall. Their eyes were burning with flames, and they held maces that were tens of meters long. Every step they took would crush countless dark creatures. Other than that, there was also the large Death Knight Legion. There were skeleton soldiers and countless undead creatures. Many warriors looked at them with their naked eyes, and their legs trembled in fear. There were too many of them. There were millions and tens of millions of dark soldiers. There were too many of them. It was unimaginable. East, south, west, north. They came from all directions. Lava lizards with burning bodies crawled out from the lava rivers around the dark, flat-topped mountain. After more than 30 minutes of setting up camp, the enchanters and great enchanters had built a steel fortress on the flat-topped mountain. In the center of the steel fortress, there was a defense super magical formation, which was made up of 100,000 magical crystals. This magic array could unleash a tremendous amount of energy, allowing it to flow through the entire mountain range and the fortress. Its purpose was to fuse the fortress and the mountain range into one, greatly strengthening it. Its defensive capabilities were decent, and it could also prevent the outpost from being destroyed by huge forces and tremors. Get to the city wall. You bunch of cowards, stop saying that your legs are weak. Get to the city wall immediately. Remember, we are in charge of the east and south walls. Don't go to the wrong place and affect the performance of our allies. Where are the heavy-duty magical Gatling guns? All of you, stand up for me. What the hell are you bastards thinking about? I want all 20,000 heavy-duty magical Gatling guns to appear on the city wall. Meng Lu shouted. How many of them are cannon turrets? Don't worry about it. 1 cannon shell and 3 magic cannons. Move them up. Shield warriors in front, warriors in the back, and rangers in the back. Quartermaster, you are in charge of the rangers' arrows. Let them shoot until their arms are fractured. Many rangers' mouths twitched, but they didn't say anything. They didn't dare to say anything. They were the safest. If anything happened to the shield warriors and warriors in front, it wouldn't just be a matter of fractured arms. The epic commanders and legion commanders of the City of Dawn were shouting crazily. The city wall of the military fortress was only 30 meters tall. As the city wall was built at the edge of the flat-topped mountain, the length of each wall was more than 30,000 meters. In total, there was a battle line of 120,000 meters. The thickness of the city wall was beyond imagination. It was more than 20 meters thick. Even if a legendary professional were to hit it, he would only be able to create a large pit. He wouldn't be able to completely destroy it. The city wall had been refined long ago. Before it was taken out, it was hidden in the space ring. Actually, the commander of the Temple of Light didn't make a big fuss. But as the atmosphere became more and more tense, and as the Dark Army approached, the Dark Army started to join forces with the commander of the City of Dawn. They started cursing and swearing. They wished that these B** stars could get into formation as soon as possible. At the same time, the first wave of the Dark Army's invasion had appeared. Tens of thousands of giant lava lizards crawled out of the lava river surrounding the flat-topped mountain. Each of them was 7 to 8 meters long. Not only was lava flowing on the surface of their bodies, but their bodies were also burning with flames. Their claws were very sharp, and they could easily break through the rocky cliffs. They continued to climb up. The scales on their heads and backs were also very hard. Most of them were high-level magical beasts. They were abnormally powerful. However, after they climbed up the 1,000-meter-tall mountain, no matter how sharp their claws were, they couldn't break through the city wall. In the end, they could only attempt to climb to the top of the city wall by piling on top of each other. As one of the City of Dawn's biggest customers, the Temple of Light had purchased many magic Gatling guns. Although there weren't many of them, there were still tens of thousands of them. Furthermore, the Temple of Light had its own advanced technology, which was the Sacred Light Magic Cannon. The power of each cannon couldn't be compared to the magic cannon, but could be fired continuously, and there were many of them. In addition, the cannon had the special effects of sacred light and holy water. The destructive power of the cannon against dark creatures was comparable to that of the magic cannon. In general, under the joint defense of both sides, this military fortress had an absolute defense. But they didn't know how many Dark Lords would be attracted by this battle. William looked at the giant lava lizards that were piling on top of each other. He didn't order his subordinates to attack. Instead, he signaled Diablo with his eyes. Both of them came out of the city wall and released a few bursts of battle energy to kill the giant lava lizards. In the dark world, dark elements occupied 7 levels of the fortress. When a normal professional absorbed magic, it would take a long time to convert it into battle energy. But the recovery speed of a legendary professional was much faster than that of a low-level professional. So instead of letting the legendary professionals attack, it was better to let the legendary professionals kill the small fries. The legendary professionals of the Temple of Light also understood this logic. Before the Dark Army arrived, the legendary professionals used their battle energy to throw the small fries to the bottom of the mountain, which was thousands of meters high. The fries were smashed into a pile of meat paste. The flesh of the giant lava lizards was too sour. There was nothing to eat next. The entire fortress became extremely quiet. The first batch of professionals on the city wall looked at the dark creatures in all directions. Many of them couldn't help but breathe heavily. But most of them kept their mouths shut and wore special gas masks to prevent themselves from inhaling the harmful impurities. The air in the dark world was filled with poison. Professionals below the advanced level couldn't resist it. Even a high-level professional could not live here for a long time without a magic mask. Unless they had a steady supply of medical help or various buffs, they wouldn't be able to survive here. But the City of Dawn and the Temple of Light were prepared. Almost all the advanced professionals had this special mask. Time passed slowly. The rumbling sounds got closer. When the Dark Army was only tens of thousands of meters away from the plateau, the attacking Dark Army stopped in their tracks. William thought that the Lord of Darkness would appear and say something. In the end, buzz. The sound of the horn shook the heavens and the earth. The attack of the Dark Army was about to begin. Countless dark creatures burst forth with their fastest speed and surged towards the fortress at the same time. Dark clouds were rolling. The earth was trembling. The 1,000-meter-tall mountain was trembling. It was as if the dark waves were about to completely bury the reef. A great battle. It was about to start. Chapter 6:11. The Lord of Darkness remained hidden. Naturally, Ursula was the same. If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move either. Why do they need 2 sages to fight in the dark world? What was defense? What was offense? Ursula chose to defend the military fortress. It meant that he had to protect all the professionals in the fortress and prevent the enemy Lord of Darkness from attacking. As for the sages who chose to attack, they could kill anyone. They used the largest domain and the most powerful moves to kill all the dark creatures. No matter what level the enemy was, they could only kill. Everything was to reduce the pressure faced by their own warriors. This was a war between light and darkness. There were no hidden rules here. In this war, there was only one rule. The winner would be the king. William was the commander-in-chief of the 10 outposts. He was responsible for roaming the battlefield and resolving the crisis. The rest was about this. Many of the legendary masters of the Brilliant Shrine expressed great distrust towards Ursula. Fortunately, it was not the time for them to take the initiative to attack. They only needed to guard the fortress. They also believed that Ursula could withstand the pressure brought by the Dark Lord. Lancelot was full of confidence in his old friend, but he did not have time to chat with William. Time passed slowly. Hundreds of thousands of warriors on the 4 city walls watched the Dark Army approaching. The word kill resounded in the heavens and earth. At that moment, thousands of magic cannons lit up at the same time. It was accompanied by a buzzing sound. Thousands of magic cannons shot out at the same time, causing mushroom clouds of various sizes to form in the Dark Army. Destructive energy shockwaves spread over 1,000 meters, and dark creatures like the Dark Knights and skeleton soldiers fell to the ground like dominoes. Everything within a few hundred meters of the center of the explosion was reduced to ashes. There were even several dark giants that were over 100 meters tall that died at this moment. Their chests and heads were either smashed to smithereens or their entire bodies were smashed into pieces. 3 large bone dragons were hit and fell to the ground. It was unknown if they were dead or alive. The dwarfs had developed the creation of the gnomes at the end of the second era. By the fourth era, the bone dragons had been upgraded to their limits. Just the first wave. Hundreds of thousands of dark creatures had fallen here. Some of them were epic monsters. But at the same time, more dark creatures charged forward. They climbed the tall mountains or flew into the sky, attacking the fortress that belonged to the god's continent from all directions. Fire! William roared angrily. Fire! The epic-level commanders and army commanders roared. Fire! Countless soldiers puffed out their chests and roared at the top of their lungs. At that moment, countless magical weapons were bursting with dazzling light. The magic energy Gatling guns were fully activated, aiming at the ground below, the front, and the high altitude as energy bullets were slanted. A series of battle energy skills and magic skills covered the sky as they surged towards the dark creatures in all directions. The enemy's attack was like a dark tide, surging forward violently. At this moment, in this dusky sky, in this blood-red battlefield, when all the scenes erupted, it was just like a battle to defend a planet. It was like the human race was facing countless Zergs, unleashing the most powerful firepower imaginable. But now, no one would be immersed in such a shocking scene. Many epic experts in the Dark Army charged up the city walls in an attempt to destroy the cannons and the magic energy Gatling guns. They also discovered that these powerful items were the most important war weapons. As long as they could get their hands on these things, the Dark Race Army wouldn't suffer so many losses even if they didn't have a 90% chance of winning the war. But they did not expect that. The epic experts in the fortress had not appeared. Many Grandmaster Rangers and Cannon Gunners had already raised their magic energy destruction guns and locked onto the epic experts. Along with the deafening sound of gunfire, the sound of gunfire rang out. Of the more than 40 epic experts that rushed out, more than 20 of them stopped in the air and were torn apart by the magic energy Gatling gun. Otherwise, they would be shot dozens of times, and their bodies would be smashed into pieces. It was a tragic sight to behold as they fell into the midst of the Dark Army. No one knew if they would survive. Upon witnessing this scene, many epic experts retreated and did not dare to advance. But the legendary experts in the Dark Army were enraged. They had many questions in their minds. What the F***CK? This was a magical fantasy world. Everyone was using cold weapons to begin with, but you forcefully turned it into an interstellar battlefield. Damn it, can't you ask for more? If you do this, I won't play with you anymore. The legendary demons, Death Knights, Headless Horsemen, Balrogs, and so on all surrounded the Throne of Darkness. One of the legendary demons even cursed. To be honest, these surface creatures are too shameless. That existence used God's descent at the beginning, causing many ambushes to fail. Now they're still using these fancy things. If they have the ability, fight us head-on. Humph. But even if that person dares to suppress the entire world, he won't dare to last too long. Otherwise, when the god descends, the world of gods will experience endless darkness. A Death Knight sneered. My lord, should we attack? A demon looked at the Lord of Darkness on the throne. Agars, the second-ranked god of the 72 demon gods, had long since stepped into the Lord of Darkness level. After the battle with Burial, he had always been in his territory and did not participate in the war against Demon King Burial. At this moment, he was dressed in armor, and his helmet only revealed a pair of pitch-black eyes. Agars looked at the battlefield in front of him quietly. After pondering for a long time, he said, "Do you know who that existence that surpassed the Saint Realm is?" Dozens of legendary experts lowered their heads in confusion or fear, but they were all completely ignorant. It could not be helped. When they did not participate in the war in the world of gods, they had very little understanding of the continent. Agar said in a low voice, "Half of the professionals in this fortress are under that person's command." Many legendary experts were shocked. Among them, the legendary demon who said he wanted to attack knelt while trembling, trying to get his lord to forgive his ignorance. It was obvious. Agars didn't blame his men. He just stood up slowly and put his left hand on the black hilt of his sword. In fact, this war isn't going to end in an instant. But I also want to ask you, do you think I should do it myself? He said in a tone that answered his own question. No one dared to respond. So he said again, My lord said that if I can kill half of the army of the brilliant shrine, I will have a further opportunity. Do you think I should go? Many legendary demons shook their heads, obviously feeling that it was not worth it. But Agar's continued. My lord also said that if I can kill all the troops of the brilliant shrine, I will definitely step into the peak of the Overlord. And if I can kill that deputy lord, that is, Ursula, he will let me cultivate in the origin of darkness for 1,000 years, and even have a certain chance to step into a higher realm. Tell me, his voice suddenly became extremely loud. Should I go and kill them? Dozens of legendary demons looked at him with bright eyes, and at the same time, they knelt on the ground and roared, My lord's combat power is unparalleled. Even in the battle with Demon King Burial, you are not at a disadvantage. The chances of killing that Ursula are definitely not small. Unfortunately, Agar's laughed at himself in his heart. 10 Dark Lords besieged Burial and were defeated. How could they say such a thing? But he still said, Do you really think I'm stupid? Ursula's aura is like that of a beginner of the Sage Realm. What a joke. How can there be a beginner of the Sage Realm who has lived for 10,000 years in the world? How can there be a deputy lord who has lived for more than 10,000 years in the world? How many years of history does the brilliant shrine have? He narrowed his eyes, and when he looked at Ursula, he was full of caution. He said bluntly, Actually, we are in charge of the 2 walls in the southeast. Paimon is in charge of the other 2 walls. Just leave Ursula to him. Why should I do this? But when Agar's turned to William, he said with a cold expression, Kill. Double the attack from the southeast. As long as one wall is broken, it will be very difficult for them to continue defending this fortress. If we compare the two, we will have made more contributions, and our God may give us some rewards. Moreover, my lord also said that the rewards for killing this so-called Son of Destiny are also very rich. Agar's narrowed his eyes, and his body disappeared into the void. In the next moment, more than 30 legendary professionals broke through the sky at the same time. They were like red meteors, and they exploded at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Along with the air waves that formed circular shock waves, they charged straight at the 2 walls. Ursula calmly looked at the sky. He seemed to have sensed something. William turned to look at him and gestured for him not to make a move. Subsequently, Burn Cinder, Diablo, Sarimas, Wendy, and Annie all stood up. At the same time, William used beings to transform into soldiers. The aura of nearly 30 legendary professionals appeared on the battlefield. There were also dozens of epic professionals. When they saw this scene, the experts of the Dark Army were also stunned, but they had good eyesight. They could tell that the legendary professionals were just puppets. No wonder. There was only one sage guarding this place. It turned out that this peak legendary expert was also a very powerful puppet master. But when the legendary professionals from both sides collided with each other, a shadow appeared on the surface of William's body. He took a step forward and punched out fiercely. Bang! The space cracked inch by inch. A series of ring-shaped shock waves spread out in all directions. Solid thunderbolts roared out and instantly traversed hundreds of thousands of meters. A figure hidden in the space retreated along with the thunderbolts. His body smashed the bodies of several legendary devils and tore an abyss in the Dark Army. Then he rolled and bounced on the ground. Agar's, who was covered in injuries and had lost his armor, was dumbfounded. He was really dumbfounded. He was in a trance from this punch. But at the same time, William descended from the sky. He fiercely stomped on Agar's chest. Another punch smashed on Agar's head. Bang! Agar's arms, which he tried to block, were broken, and his head disappeared. The ground within a radius of 100,000 meters sank by tens of meters. Countless dark creatures were hit by this punch. At the same time, they turned into a pile of meat paste. The legendary experts and the countless dark creatures that had arrived at the 2 sides of the city wall were all stunned. They looked at the headless corpse of their lord in bewilderment. Their lord seemed to want to recover from his injuries, but he was firmly controlled by that man. At this moment, the dark creatures were completely dumbfounded. The entire battlefield was silent at this moment. Even Ursula, who was guarding the fortress, stood up. The Lord of Darkness, who was hidden in another layer of clouds, looked at William in disbelief. William held the undead Agars in one hand and slowly stretched his waist. He chuckled and said, "Legendary killing sage? I've never seen it before. Then you're really inexperienced. Charge!" William shouted angrily. The legendary and epic experts of the City of Dawn went out to fight. Ursula slowly sat down. He looked deeply at the shadow on William's body and looked at the sky in a daze. God's Descent. Chapter 6:12. The meaning of God's descent was obvious. The avatar of the god would descend into a living being's body and provide the living being with extremely powerful combat power. In the battlefield of the mythological era, the true bodies of the gods were usually high and mighty. They would not appear at all, but the avatar of the gods would perform God's descent under the prayers of the believers. From then on, they would win the war and obtain greater benefits. But there was one thing. There was a huge price to pay for God's descent. It was not for the gods. It was for the people who were affected by the god's descent, because they could not withstand the descent of the god's avatar. After the god descent ended, their bodies would disintegrate and their life potential would be exhausted. They would not live for long. This price was not something that the life potion could save. But what about William? Ursula looked at William's smiling expression. He knew that William's descent would not have any side effects. That's F***king inconceivable. To think that a selfish god would choose to consume his own divine power rather than waste the life potential of his host. That's completely F***king impossible. What level of God's descent is this? Avatar. It can't be his true body, right? If it's not his true body, how could William have such powerful combat power and defeat a Lord of Darkness? But if it's the true body of a god, that's not right. Even if the body of a god can be transformed into energy, a legendary professional might not be able to withstand it. Unless the god and the god have the same body, it doesn't make sense. Ursula had a splitting headache. He could not understand what technique William had used. But if it was a technique that did not consume any energy, not just the legendary continent, but the entire god's world would look at the City of Dawn in a new light. William's God's Descent state had not ended. His body transformed into a blood-red lightning and dashed into the battlefield. Streaks of lightning filled with plasma spread out. This extremely hot and powerful red lightning spread out like a shockwave the moment it exploded, turning all the dark creatures within a radius of tens of thousands of meters into ashes. The ground was also turned into mush, ensuring that there were no living creatures left on the ground that could still move. Meanwhile, when he arrived at the center of the Dark Army, the Thunder Sanctuary was activated. Rumble. It was a massive and transparent spherical lightning barrier that expanded to a radius of 100,000 meters in an extremely short period of time. Within this domain, countless bolts of lightning flowed within, and the ground was filled with arcs of electricity. Inside this transparent lightning dome was a blood-red world. Red lightning liquid floated in all directions, forming a sea of lightning. In just a few seconds, every dark creature below the legendary rank was reduced to ashes. There was no other way. It was too hot. It was too powerful. In particular, the power of lightning had a great restraining effect on creatures of darkness. If one did not personally experience it, no one would be able to imagine just how hot and deadly the lightning of a lightning saint was. When the dark creatures faced William, they felt as if they had plunged into the sun. They died on the spot without any resistance. This was the effect of a saint massacring a low-level battlefield. In less than 30 seconds, a quarter of Agar's army of more than 4 million creatures had died at William's hands. Even if they were killing low-level creatures, they still provided him with a lot of experience points. At this moment, the Dark Army no longer had the mentality to continue attacking. Even though many legendary devils were roaring and commanding the battlefield, most of the dark creatures had started to flee uncontrollably. However, it was unknown whether Paimon, who was on the other side of the battlefield, could not bear to watch any longer, or whether he intended to gather Agar's army. He transformed into a ray of rainbow light, tore through space, and instantly appeared in front of William. William clashed his fist with Paimon's. Pom, 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 pom. A huge shockwave tore the ground apart. A lot of magma was spurted thousands of meters into the sky due to this huge pressure. Some innocent Balrogs who had just escaped were instantly squashed into meat paste. The space in front of them was hammered, forming a pitch-black crack. When the magical elements were squeezed together, they exploded continuously. Both of them retreated hundreds of meters. They only managed to stop after stomping on the air. William raised his eyebrows when he saw the newcomer. Paimon. He was one of the 72 devil gods and had the title of one of the 4 supreme pillars. He was one of the 4 strongest among the 72 devil gods. He had the combat power of an advanced sage, so he was not weak. It had to be known. Odin had returned to the mythological era and become a main god. But after he returned to the current timeline, he could not bring his cultivation and realm back. He could only have his original strength, which was the combat power of an intermediate god. He just had some endowments and skills. It was the same for God's Descent. It allowed William to have the full strength of Odin for a short period of time. Meanwhile, the 3-meter-tall muscle man glanced at the crack on his fist and said in a muffled voice, "Combat power close to that of a high-level, holy level? Not bad. Let me test your abilities." In the next second, when Paimon attacked again, the dark elements were extracted from the magic that filled the sky. In a short period of time, they formed a fist that was thousands of meters long and hammered towards William. William sneered. When the energy fist swept up a tornado and approached, he used sword draw. A blood-red lightning sword energy tore through the sky. The sword energy shot from the ground to the sky. This indescribably dazzling sword energy seemed to have come from the sky, and it had infinite power. Not only did it cut off the fist that was thousands of meters long, but it also tore through the space and hit the surface of Paimon's body. Rumble. Accompanied by the sound of air explosions, his body was embedded in the mountain like a cannonball. The mountain that was thousands of meters tall was shaking violently. Huge rocks kept falling, and the impact formed by the collision spread out layer by layer like ripples, causing countless dark creatures to be flung to the surface. If not for the stabilizing and strengthening magic formation and the defensive preparations that Ursula had made before, this mountain would have been destroyed by William and Ursula. But Paimon's counterattack was even faster. His feet crushed the mountain that was hundreds of meters tall, and he turned into a rainbow light and collided with William again. The two of them were entangled and fell into the distance. They dragged out a 10,000-meter-long ditch on the ground. After bouncing back and forth, they once again clashed head-on with their fists against the sword energy. The sound of metal and stone colliding resounded in the sky. Waves of air swept across the ruined land. The constant collision between the two of them created pressure that caused the ground under their feet to sink continuously. Magma in the depths of the ground kept sputtering into the sky. The battle between the two was like the end of the world, and it caused unimaginable damage to the Darkness continent. And this was just a battle between two sages. The sages' group battle at the end of the Second Era had destroyed the entire God's continent. This was enough to prove that if existences like them did not fight in the space of sages, there would be no place in the world that was suitable for ordinary creatures to live. But it was obvious. Paimon was really strong. This muscular man who had stepped into the sage realm purely with his physical body could even resist the lethality of the heaven-suppressing blade for a short period of time. In particular, his combat strength was half a level higher than William's. Because Odin's God's Descent had fused with William, he could at most be considered as a middle-level sage. He was still half a step away from reaching the advanced sage realm. But even so, William still relied on Odin's previous combat experience to forcefully fight to a draw with him. The attacks of the dark side did not stop. The battlefield between the two of them was not nearby. this group of reckless fellows started to attack again. Ursula, who was guarding the center of the military fortress, no longer concealed his strength. He also chose to attack and defeat this group of Beastards. In the next moment, holy light shone. Countless dark creatures surrounding the military fortress saw the dazzling white light that illuminated the dark world. Within a radius of hundreds of thousands of meters, the dazzling white light covered every inch of the land. Like snow melting in the spring, many low-level dark creatures were reduced to puddles of blood as soon as the light shone on their bodies. Even if the other high-level dark creatures could resist, all their attributes would be greatly reduced. Even the legendary devils suffered the same fate. All the legendary and epic creatures in the military fortress seized the opportunity to rush to the outer perimeter of the city and started a massacre against the countless dark army. Diablo was like Magneto. He threw out a mountain of metal particles from his space ring and transformed into a tornado that rushed towards the dark army. Wherever the metal storm passed, ordinary epic devils would be sliced into pieces. Serene transformed into the time dragon. He flapped his wings and knocked a bone dragon to the ground. The two of them fought, and within a short 10 seconds, he had torn the ancient dragon into pieces. The time realm that he formed caused countless creatures to continuously distort, age rapidly, or turn into babies. Burn, Cinder, Annie, Wendy, every single one of them was a legendary professional who could fight against many enemies. With the help of William's legendary and epic heroic spirits, the moment all of them rushed out, with the firepower of the mana Gatling guns and magic cannons, the scales of victory were already on their side. The legendary professionals of the Temple of Light were not weak either. When Lancelot faced the dark creatures, he had no worries. He transformed into a light sword that was thousands of meters long and charged into the dark army of millions, slashing them into pieces. But Paimon, who was engaged in a fierce battle with William, acted as if he did not see it. He allowed the dark army of 8 million to perish here. But nobody noticed. More and more dark creatures were killed. The battlefield around the plateau had turned into a sea of blood. The dark elements became denser and denser. If a dark element professional trained, he might enter a state of epiphany and increase his level. Until this moment, Paimon borrowed the power of William's sword and retreated to the center of the battlefield. In the next second, William's expression changed drastically. Paimon's body instantly grew to thousands of meters. He was like a giant that covered the sky. He started to absorb the dense dark elements and countless amounts of fresh blood. His aura also increased rapidly. His combat power was that of an advanced sage, and it was getting closer to the pinnacle of the sage level. William brandished his sword and slashed at Paimon, but he only lost 50% of his health points. He was unable to kill Paimon. 10 seconds later, accompanied by a roar, Paimon, who was enveloped by crimson dark elements, reappeared before everyone's eyes. At this moment, heaven and earth celebrated, the pinnacle of the sage level. At the same time, all the professionals in the military fortress were dumbfounded. The guy in front of him paid the price of 8 million dark creatures to help him step into this realm. But just as William was about to use his father's blood essence, Paimon suddenly turned his head and looked at the center of the fortress. Ursula merely glanced at him indifferently before he slowly extended his hand. Swoosh! The dark clouds were torn apart. The sky was torn apart. A dazzling white light appeared in front of everyone. Then, a huge hand made of holy light that was tens of thousands of meters long appeared before everyone's eyes. Paimon's body grew bigger again. He was now 10,000 meters tall. But to the holy light giant hand that was also growing in size, he was like a tiny dot. Bang! The entire heaven and earth trembled. Paimon, who was 10,000 meters tall, was slapped deep into the ground. Then, the huge hand made a few palm strikes. Palm, palm, palm. 3 seconds later, heaven and earth wailed. Within a radius of 1 million kilometers, there was a rain of blood. Countless dark creatures were crying. The Lord of Darkness, he had perished. William looked deeply at Ursula and then at the distant sky. He could not help but mutter, "I wonder how much blood will reign in the two worlds today." Chapter 613. The vanguard mission of the 10th outpost of the legendary continent did not last for long. The mission was declared a failure after the two Lords of Darkness were captured and killed. Millions of dark creatures fled in all directions. Most of the dark creatures that escaped were low-level dark creatures. Even if the legendary, epic, and grandmaster devils wanted to escape, they had to depend on the 40-meter-long sword in William's hand. William had hammered Agar's head, but Agar's did not perish. Instead, he was completely controlled. William did not intend to continue using soul control. He only wanted to squeeze Agar's dry before killing him personally. Or, how about selling it? William had heard that some sage demon hunters were interested in it. However, such a crushing victory did not happen in every outpost. On this day, there were a total of 70 outposts, and 13 outposts could not even withstand the first wave of siege. According to statistics, there were 13 million warriors who died in these 13 outposts. Among them, 303 were epic professionals, 69 were legendary professionals, and 8 were sages. Among them were Seraphian, humans, elves, and dwarf sages from other continents. According to the ratio, the number of sages who died was the highest. This was one of the 13 outposts, and the legendary continent occupied one of them. That was one of the outposts that the Frost Empire was responsible for. After they arrived, they were besieged by 4 Lords of Darkness. 3 of their teleportation portals were immediately destroyed, causing them to fall into a state of isolation and helplessness. Seeing that there was no hope, the Wood Saint Tree Lord self-destructed to create a temporary small world in the Dark World. This allowed the land within a radius of several hundred kilometers to instantly grow into a boundless forest. There was also an extremely powerful barrier. This gave the other space warlocks Saint the opportunity to create a space door and allowed the remaining nearly 1 million soldiers to escape. It was precisely because the sages of various races fought with their lives that more than half of the professionals in the 13 outposts survived. If the sages did not fight with their lives, the 26 million professionals would have all died here. As to whether they should preserve the top combat power of the legendary level, or let the remaining 13 million professionals die, no one would argue about this, because the sages were not gods. Only with civilization, a prosperous society, and a sufficient number of professionals could more saints be born. In fact, even the gods of the world of gods had feelings. It was just that the emotions of saints were stronger. That was because they weren't born in the legendary realm. They had all become strong step by step from being weak, and then slowly stepped into the saint realm. Only then did they become the guardian of a race, an empire, or a camp. And since he was a guardian god, they naturally understood the meaning of these 3 words better than anyone else. They chose to ignore the pressure brought about by the darkness invasion. They could ignore the darkness world. They only wanted to guard their home and prevent the darkness creatures from invading. But when they really chose to fight, this group of powerhouses with endless lifespans knew better than anyone else. This was war. This was a war between 2 continents. This was no trifling matter. It was precisely because the saints knew that the war between the 2 continents would be cruel that they would reject it and use all sorts of perfunctory methods to play along with the light pope. After all, they understood if the war really broke out. Sainthood did not mean invincibility. As for the saints who had grown up from being weak, they could not ignore the fact that fresh lives were dying in front of them, while they themselves had to escape. This was because the people they brought had the same bloodline as them, spoke the same language, and had similar appearances. The tens of millions of living beings were their clansmen, warriors under their command, and fresh lives that had stepped into the abyss according to their orders. These saints could not abandon them so easily on the second day of the outpost. There were still 32 outposts that were still engaged in a tug-of-war. The other outposts were either defeated or won, and had a short respite. There were many reasons for this. For example, the Darkness Lord did not want to take the initiative to attack, but there was only one Darkness Lord attacking the outpost. Hence, the aimless tug-of-war could only continue. and there was one outpost that did not encounter any attacks at all. They had already begun to explore the darkness world and collect all sorts of resources. They were like the children of the goddess of luck. The other outposts were like adopted children, and they even had a vicious stepmother who could beat them to death. At this moment, William had already dispelled the state of God's arrival. He only knew so much information in Ursula's room, but he could not help but ask, how many darkness lords have died? Ursula was the commander-in-chief of the outpost in the legendary continent. He knew a lot of things. This eternal second-in-command glanced at him. A total of 13 darkness lords have died in battle, and 3 have been captured, including the one in your hand. It's a bit of a loss. William scratched his head. A total of 8 saints had died in battle in the 7 continents, but they had only exchanged for 15 darkness lords. No matter how he looked at it, it was a loss. At least you have some foresight. We really did not gain anything. Ursula sighed. He opened the 3-dimensional map in the crystal ball. This was a map of resources within a radius of 1,000 kilometers of the 10th outpost. He continued, actually, after the Age of Gods, the combat power of the darkness world was far less than that of the gods' continent. But now, there are more darkness lords. Because the most important thing is that although there are many wars in the darkness world, at least there is a darkness god secretly controlling it. There is no race war that is enough to destroy the world. But our god's continent is different. Let's not talk about the mythological era. Everyone is the plaything of the gods. We can't compare our happiness. We can only compare our misery. But the Great Dragon era brought a great disaster to our major races. This group of beasts ate everything. Who knows how many creatures with outstanding potential died in the mouths of the dragon race. Many sage seeds died in their mouths. And the Elven era was invaded by the darkness world. In addition to the world-destroying war between the humans and the elves, the entire god's continent was torn apart. Many sages died. Now, because the training system has matured, there are more and more sages in the god's continent. But the darkness lords are not too far behind. If not for the fact that the attributes of the darkness lords are relatively simple, and most of them are of the darkness attribute, we have many ways to restrain them in terms of high-end combat power. Otherwise, the god's continent would have long been occupied by the dark creatures. William was originally looking at the 3-dimensional map, but in the end, he realized that Ursula had said many things that no one knew. But he still could not help but ask, the Pope of Light, why didn't he do anything to suppress them? Would he dare? The god of darkness is still not dead, and it is very likely that he will descend at any time. If he dares to kill all the darkness lords, the god of darkness will dare to kill all the sages of the various races after his rebirth. When that time comes, what can he do even if he is a transcendent sage? Ursula rolled his eyes and sighed. The burden on him is too heavy, especially when he is not only facing the god of darkness. All the Lord gods that have not reincarnated are existences that he has to deal with. William was silent. He had Odin's memories. He knew that the gods that had not reincarnated still had not given up on the plan to rule the world. And Ursula explained again. But because of this, he wants to think of ways to increase the fate of the various races. One of the best ways is to fight for the fate of the continent. By occupying the darkness continent, he can increase the overall fate of the god's continent. From then on, more sages will be born, and even more sages will be born. Then, he will use this to resist the era of the god's descent. How is it? Isn't it a very grand plan? Yes, I feel that the Pope can be more arrogant. It would be best if he can prevent our sages from dying. William joked. Get lost. Don't be insatiable with your words. Ursula was not interested in arguing with him. You have already memorized the map. If you have nothing to do, don't loiter around here. I'm leaving. Goodbye. His Royal Highness did not continue to argue with him, and just left. In fact, his main purpose was to get a map of resources from him. If there were no accidents, these resource maps, they should have been discovered by the devils who were in the Chow camp, but had their hearts in the Han camp. This included Daniel, who had become the Darkness Lord. But This outpost did not only have the City of Dawn and the Temple of Light. There were also the Dwarfs, the Commerce Alliance, and many other forces here. The distribution of resources within 1,000 kilometers was limited. Ursula could see that William had killed a Darkness Lord and give him many resource points within 100 kilometers. As for the rest, William had to find them himself. Very soon, he faced the dusky sky and flew to the war conference room of the City of Dawn. He immediately summoned Burn Cinder, Sarimas, and many other epic professionals. William drew out the map from his memory and said, "Our outpost has killed 2 Darkness Lords. In a short period of time, we definitely won't encounter a large-scale attack. Logically speaking, even if the Darkness Lords replace them, it will take a long time for them to take over their territories. Even if they take over the territories, they might not launch an all-out attack. At most, they will try to contain us and probe us on a small scale. Because we won the first battle, it is equivalent to putting a nail in the coffin. But they will definitely not let us collect resources in peace." I have obtained a resource map from Ursula. There are 3 mithril mines, 6 fire crystal mines, 2 orichalca mines, 8 black crystal mines, 1 magical crystal mine, and 2 magical crystal mines. We have to excavate all of them within this period of time. You could distribute these tasks among yourselves. Do I have to say more? Understood, Your Highness. Many legendary and epic professionals responded in unison. Then distribute them. Distribute all the Earth Element mages as well. If the number of Earth Element mages is insufficient, mobilize more from the City of Dawn. Oh yes, Wendy, you are in charge of building a teleportation portal near the mines. It will connect here and then teleport to the City of Dawn. Yes, Wendy, who is dressed in purple magic, nodded. Also, find some enchanters to explore the undiscovered resource points. At this point, William suddenly thought of something. He said in a rare, gentler tone, "Get the water and wood mages and enchanters to plant as many trees as possible in the city as possible. Create a river or something. Also, try to create a barrier to maintain the pure air. After all, the warriors are risking their lives to fight. The logistics services have to be in place. Otherwise, all they see is lava and the fiery red sky." Many people had smiles on their faces. In fact, they also knew that this group of 1 million soldiers stationed in the military fortress, if there were no special circumstances, it would be very difficult for them to return to the gods' continent. Because as time passed, they would become veterans in the conquest of the Dark World. They would lead batches of new recruits to survive here and teach them the experience that they had gained by risking their lives. They were treasures. It would be very difficult for them to leave the Dark World alive. Old? Would they have the chance to grow old here? William seemed to know what they were thinking. But the ring of reincarnation in his hands had already collected the souls of 180,000 people. If his warriors did not live to grow old, then William would let them be reborn in the World Tree. Chapter 614. While the outpost was not attacked by the Dark Army, William stepped into the teleportation portal and arrived at the City of Dawn. He had just returned home. The sound of cannons came from the south. William flew high into the sky and discovered that the Dawn fleet could easily defend against the incoming sea monsters. After all, they had a powerful weapon like the Mana Gatling. These unintelligent sea monsters would only be sending themselves to their deaths. William was not too worried about them. Even though the City of Dawn had sent a large number of soldiers to the Dark World, there were still 1 million soldiers left behind. Most of them were stationed in other cities and carrying out mercenary missions. The beast tide seemed difficult to stop, but depended on the power. William had thought that it would be difficult to stop the sea beasts. But now, he discovered that the City of Dawn had become a powerful force. It was difficult to deal with the other powers. There were only about 200,000 soldiers of the Dawn Navy stationed along the coast. Together with Douglet, Captain Jack, and Paul, who was at the peak of the legendary realm, they were the first line of defense that they couldn't break. Of course, if the deep-sea race dared to send out a sage expert, William did not mind letting him enter and be sold away. Subsequently, he went to the forbidden area of the Rainbow Lake alone. The world tree was currently 3,500 meters tall. In half a year, it would reach a height of 4,000 meters. Even if it grows slower in the later stages of the game version update, it should still reach a height of 6,000 to 7,000 meters. After the third magic revival, it will grow even faster. William stroked his chin. If it could reach such a height, it would be equivalent to a majestic mountain peak. The branches of the world tree were lush. Every branch was thick and long, giving people the feeling that they were growing. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible to hold them with one's hands. I should be able to build a house on the world tree. It's a pity that it's not the time to reveal itself. William thought. The telepathy of the world tree took effect. He immediately sprouted branches and leaves at the highest point, forming an exquisite and magnificent treehouse. He said proudly, "Do you like it?" William's eyes lit up, and he nodded. "Yes, build a few more beside me. There are other people who want to live there." The world tree fell into deep thought. It was just William and William, but he wanted to find a bunch of people to occupy it? Damn, perverted. But the world tree obediently sprouted some tree houses. It was very simple and did not consume much energy. It was just changing the shape of the branches. Meanwhile, William took out the ring of reincarnation and said, "I will put these 180,000 souls into your body. From now on, the 10,000 elves that are born every month will use these souls." Can you do that? When a world tree heard this, its branches and leaves couldn't help but dance. It said happily, "That's great. If you can provide enough souls, I can even give birth to 20,000 elves every month. In fact, their bodies won't consume too much of my energy. Souls are the most complicated things. But you must know that the souls you provide are all very powerful and complete. They all have their own origin power. I cannot guarantee that they will be loyal to you after they are born." The prince's eyes flashed with a trace of nostalgia. He smiled and said, "They're all my warriors. They died on the battlefield. I don't have a hall of Valhalla for them to enjoy, so I can only let them live again." "All right." The world tree shook its huge body and nodded. Once again, William arrived at the expanding pocket world. All the elves born from the world tree lived in this small world that was comparable to a human kingdom. At this moment, the area of the small world was still expanding along with the growth of the world tree. Many creatures, animals, and magical beasts from the mythological era were also constantly growing. William even saw a cyclops. It was incredible. Obviously, the small world born from the world tree was far more powerful than other small worlds. Not only were there more species, but they were also rarer. He even suspected that after countless years of growth, the small world that was controlled by the elves had given birth to great dragons, behemoths, and other creatures. The world tree had experienced many eras. William couldn't imagine how big the small world would be. It might even be comparable to a legendary continent, or even larger. If that was the case, it would be a real world. Even if the world tree was destroyed, the small world would be torn apart. The small world was also torn apart. Even if some of the elves living in the small world were attacked, they should be able to preserve a lot of their strength. William narrowed his eyes. The elves of the Second Era fought against the Dark Army for more than 800 years. Many sages and elves died in battle. But according to the wisdom of a large race, they are definitely not fools. That means they have a greater intention. The prince sucked in a breath of cold air. He suddenly thought of something. Had the elves already predicted that they would decline in the Second Era? Had they retreated to the small world in a way that looked as if both sides had suffered great losses and were defeated by the human race? Had they only displayed a small portion of their strength in the gods' continent and pretended to drag out an ignoble existence? It was possible. The elves of the Second Era were too powerful. They had the most sages in the entire continent. It was possible that no one could predict the fate of the elves. But their only miscalculation was that the world tree had been destroyed. No. William shook his head again. He clenched his fists and inhaled a breath of cold air. He muttered to himself, "In my previous life, the coordinates of the world tree were revealed. The Seraphian, humans, elves and dwarves fought over it. But in the end, it was taken away by an unknown force. No one knew which side that force belonged to before I died. But no one could predict the location of the world tree. Could it be that the elves took it away and hid it in the small world? And those small worlds were born from the world tree in the first place. Perhaps the world tree can use them as nutrients and grow extremely quickly. William was stunned. In addition, during the meeting at the Temple of Light, Ursula had told Bernice that the elves had many hidden sages. Was it difficult to defend against a city? If that was the case, the elves' plan was not small. They had many hidden trump cards in the small world. Simply put, besides the foolish humans, the Seraphin and the elves had hidden a lot of their strength. But the humans did not need more sages. They only needed the Supreme Pontiff of Light to be safe. William slapped his face. He turned his gaze to the city in front of him. The Elven City. There were 140,000 elves living in this city. In just over a year, some female elves were pregnant, and the second generation of elves was about to be born. William did not disturb these little fellows. When they saw him, they would stop what they were doing and bow to him. The prince casually sat on a tree trunk and quietly watched the carefree elves. They were carefree. Most of the elves were learning and training. After they were born, they were adults, but their minds were as blank as a piece of paper. William did not want these elves to go astray. He had to let them understand the true meaning of life. Therefore, listen to the Lord's words. Version 313 was the introductory reading for these elves. As for how to teach them to read and write, William did not have the time to experience it. He might as well flirt with Goddess Momo. He was about to become an adult, but he was too lazy to teach them personally. He could only find 2 epic mentors from the Battle Energy College and Magic College to teach these elves personally. As for the consequences, before William could make the world tree reveal itself, the 2 epic professionals would not appear in the God's continent again. This was to prevent the warlock sage from predicting the existence of the world tree. Don't be fooled by the fact that it was a life of confinement and a huge workload. It could not be helped. The 2 of them had to teach hundreds of thousands of elves. They would definitely go crazy from exhaustion. But William's rewards for these 2 epic professionals were not small. He gave them 500 drops of life potion and magic source. It was enough for them to stay here for 1,000 years without thinking of leaving. Moreover, William had said that as long as they could become sages, he would allow them to enter and leave freely. Then, he would get more mentors to help them. As such, the 2 epic professions naturally work hard. They actually understood the prince's talent in training. It was unbelievably fast. Of course, they could not be fast in certain aspects. They had to be slow, but extremely slow. William looked around for a while, and then left the small world. The adult elves cultivated very quickly, but in just over a year, the strongest one had only become an advanced professional. There was still a long way to go before he became a grandmaster. But it did not matter. The city of Dawn was rich and had many soldiers. It was not the time to use them. They still had a long time to train. It's boring. William yawned as he walked on the street. Many young girls and married women could not help but lick their lips when they saw this scene. William was not that kind of person. Naturally, he was not interested in doing anything with these young ladies. He took out a magic transmission scroll and sent a message to someone. 30 seconds later. Beep, 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 beep. What's that? Dark Lord? Alive? How much? No, what do you want? Beep, beep, beep. Gosh, there's finally a second cutie. I'll buy him. Beep, beep, beep. Come quickly. Otherwise, I'll go to the city of Dawn. Beep, beep, beep. Very soon. 7 sage demon hunters sent messages at the same time. They wanted to buy agars, who had been squeezed dry, at a high price. William raised his eyebrows in surprise. He had only sent a message to one person. Did all of them know about it? Gosh, what are they doing together? What do they mean by there was finally a second cutie? Gon Lin, did you dare to tell me the truth? This was the first time William knew that there were 7 sages in the Demon Hunter Guild. The *MN. You guys were really beasts. Such a powerful force could become a superpower in the God's continent. But you guys are always thinking about the darkness divine item? Damn, perverted. Come to think of it, this group of fellows who did not take the initiative to attack the Dark World performed very well in the God's Continent. In the future, after the Third Darkness invasion was launched, the shadows of the Demon Hunter Guild could be seen everywhere in the God's Continent. Their frequent activities were more frequent than any of the light forces. Chapter 615. The Demon Hunter Union was located in most of the cities on the 7 continents. The number of its members was beyond imagination. The rules of the Demon Hunter Union were very simple. Any professional could register. Even if one was a member of the City of Dawn, the Temple of Light, or a general of the human empires, one could become a demon hunter. The rules of the Demon Hunter Union were very few. Almost none. The exorcism and demon hunting missions were optional. Even if one did not do it, others would do it. Every time a mission was completed, one could hand over the captured and killed dark creatures to the Demon Hunter Union in exchange for training resources. Otherwise, he could leave his prey behind. Basically, no one would care about it. The Demon Hunter Union was very wealthy and had many powerful professionals, but they rarely participated in the battles on the continents. He only focused on dealing with the dark creatures. Of course, this referred to the 7 sage demon hunters. They were very simple in their thinking, or rather, they had a single goal. Other than dealing with the dark creatures, they did not care about anything else. This led to the Demon Hunter Union rarely participating in battles. William did not intend to let the demon hunters come to the City of Dawn, especially since the 7 sages were present. He decided to go to the headquarters of the Demon Hunter Union personally. He wanted to have a good chat with them. Oh yes, where's their headquarters? William scratched his head. Then, he entered the teleportation portal and arrived at the war-ending empire. Then, he changed his appearance and aura. Then, he arrived at the most remote southeast corner of the Eastern City District. This was an important branch of the Demon Hunter Union in the war-ending empire. But the geographical location was very remote. In William's previous life, the players had discussed that it was because the land was relatively cheap. That was why it was so inconspicuous. However, the area occupied by the Demon Hunters Union here was very large because many retired demon hunters also lived here. Oh, this group of professional demon hunters seemed to like to gather together when they were old. The Demon Hunter Union was also very supportive. Perhaps it was because they were afraid of the dark creature's revenge. William soon arrived at the intersection of the alleyway. When the pedestrians passed by, they basically stayed far away from him. When he was about to step into the alley, a young lady shouted anxiously from afar, "Brother, don't go in. There are demons inside." Her childhood sweetheart was stunned. He looked at the young girl's infatuated gaze and suddenly felt an inexplicable pain in his heart. He wanted to say, "We've known each other for so many years, but you've never called me little older brother. This brother in front of me, well, you are more handsome than me. But do you really need to look at me like that?" The prince turned around and chuckled. "Don't be afraid. I'm a powerful professional. You should go home." Ding dong. Prompt. Triple X's affinity towards you is increased by 800 points. Subsequently, William hurriedly took a step forward, afraid that the girl behind him would chase after him. However, he could already hear the girl crying. It was as if she had lost her lover. Her childhood sweetheart who had been cuckolded could not be comforted no matter what she did. After he entered, he discovered that there was indeed a barrier at the entrance of the alley, and it even blocked the aura of darkness that was being emitted. The dark aura in this area was so dense that ordinary civilians didn't dare to approach it. Meanwhile, a female human with an impressive figure wearing purple leather armor also walked in. No, this female assassin was not human, because she had pointed cat ears on her head. She seemed to be a half-human, half-beastman. TSK, TSK. It was too rare. There were half-beastmen in the God's Continent, but they weren't the anti-human kind. Usually, humans and magical beasts that had transformed into human forms would engage in certain activities to give birth to half-beastmen. Everyone understood. Hence, William involuntarily sized her up. TSK, TSK. What a fierce woman. But the cat ears were indeed quite cute. He didn't expect that such half-beastmen would be in the Demon Hunter Union. But then again, The members of the Demon Hunter Union were more complicated, and there were many messy races among them. But the cat-child assassin seemed to have noticed his gaze. She puffed up her big chest and shouted, "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a woman wearing clothes before?" The prince's mouth twitched. Damn it. She was indeed a female demon hunter. Her words were as if she was racing a car. But then again, he had seen women wearing clothes before. He had never seen a cat girl without clothes before. He did not want to bother with this epic assassin. Just as he was about to speed up, the female assassin pulled William back and looked at him cautiously. She sniffed and said in a deep voice, "Wait, there's something wrong with the dark aura on your body. I think you're here to cause trouble, aren't you?" Then the catgirl assassin couldn't help but move closer to his chest and sniff with her small nose. In the next moment, the catgirl assassin's expression changed drastically, and she retreated a few steps in fear. Her legs trembled as she shouted, "You save me. The Lord of Darkness is coming. Brothers and sisters, hide the big treasure and quickly run away." Gosh, what dog knows? William's speed was very fast. He hurriedly locked her in place and covered her mouth so that she wouldn't shout and scream. But with this move, the prince could feel the sexy figure of the catgirl. She was really too big. In addition, the aura that the Lord of Darkness had left on her body scared the catgirl to the point that she didn't dare to move. She allowed William to lock her up. In particular, Melinda discovered that her strength was like that of a baby in front of the man in front of her. Since she couldn't resist, she would just enjoy it. It was a pity. Before William could teach her a lesson and let her know that she was a human, and a male human at that, many figures appeared in the surroundings. Epic, Grandmaster, and even legendary professionals appeared. One of the male legendary professionals was furious when he saw this scene. "Let her go. Where did this legendary professional come from? How dare you bully a woman from our guild? You're courting death." William raised his eyebrows and placed a hand on Melinda's head. While rubbing her ears, he removed the seal on her face and aura. Then he said, "The Lord of the City of Dawn has been invited to the headquarters of the Demon Hunter Guild." The male legendary professional's expression changed, but when he saw that Melinda was rubbing her ears and seemed to be enjoying it, he clenched his fists and wanted to say something harsh. But the person in front of him was the Lord of the City of Dawn. It was true. It was absolutely true. Because they had never seen such a handsome man, especially when his face returned to its original appearance. Who knew how many people were dumbfounded? William ignored the prompt on the attribute panel. Sighed. He had to endure the affection points from countless ladies every day. The pressure was too great. He really just wanted to live a simple, unpretentious, low-key, and ordinary life. But his appearance did not allow him to do so. William noticed that the crowd was speechless, or perhaps they didn't dare to speak. So, he said, "I've captured a Lord of Darkness. I intend to buy his head, so my body is tainted with the aura. Is there a need to stop me?" "Lord of Darkness?" "Yes. I heard that 2 Lord of Darkness at the 10th outpost have been defeated. One of them was subdued by the Lord of the City of Dawn." Someone gasped. "He's too strong. Why didn't the man in front of me capture me?" A female demon hunter mumbled while drooling. "Ahem, mind your tone. Lord of the City of Dawn, please come this way." Another legendary professional walked out. He seemed to have received the message, so he came to entertain William personally. William smiled and strode forward. However, Melinda grabbed his hand and placed it on her head again. She seemed to enjoy the feeling. "You're still clinging to me?" The prince shrugged nonchalantly, stroked her little ear, and continued to walk forward, leaving behind a group of stunned demon hunters and an envious, jealous, and hateful legendary bootlicker. Soon, William was led to the teleportation portal by a staff member. He turned to look at Melinda. "Why? Do you want to follow me?" Yes. My name is Melinda. Can I follow you? I like your scent," Melinda said bitterly while grabbing William's right hand tightly. The prince raised an eyebrow. An epic-ranked assassin was a free gift. It would be a waste not to take it. However, when he glanced at the teleportation gate, Melinda immediately transformed into a purple kitten and lay obediently in his arms. "Forget it. I'll bring you along. Don't scream, okay?" William stroked her chin. Melinda squinted her eyes and nodded comfortably. Then, he stepped into the teleportation portal. After an unknown period of time, when he walked out again, he found that he was inside a huge space. The sky was blue and the sun was bright. There were few pedestrians on the streets. But when they saw William, they were very cautious, as if they were guarding against something. William's mouth twitched. He had no time to steal their babies. Why'd they look at him like that? He was going to beat them up. He looked around and found that the houses in this alternate dimension were dim. Most of them were made of obsidian, and there were very few green plants. Even if there were plants, they were filled with dark elements. Or rather, the dark elements in the entire dimension were very rich. William, you're finally here. What's up? Are you curious about the abundance of darkness elements here? You're just worried that the babies are living in discomfort. I've already sealed them. Without the darkness elements, they'll die. William avoided the arm around his old friend's shoulder. That was right. This was the Jurlog that he had known for a period of time. He was one of the veterans of the Demon Hunter Union. Jurlog was a sage expert. He had a good impression of William because of the large number of vampires and dark creatures in the City of Dawn. He did not care about the difference in power levels between them. Now that he had personally captured a Dark Lord, Jurlog had a good impression of William. In the next second, many sage demon hunters appeared at the same time. They smiled and looked at William, as if they were waiting for him to bring out the Dark Lord. The kitten in William's arms was very scared. It kept burrowing into William's arms. It only calmed down when it burrowed into his clothes. When William saw their malicious gazes, he coughed and said, "This is not a good place to talk. I spent a lot of effort to capture this guy, especially since he's a living Dark Lord. You should know how much he's worth, right? Hurry up. It's just an auction. Hurry up." One of the sages could not hold it in any longer. He immediately pulled William into their secret house. Once they entered, the prince's eyes widened in shock. Yes, he was a very special kind of person, a very rare kind. Yes, it was the feeling of a granny entering a grand garden. It caused every cell in his body to express shock. Chapter 616. How many dark creatures were there in the dark world? The Temple of Light did not give an accurate answer. But when he entered the secret room, he saw the slogan Dark Creatures, 3241/5320. Then, he had completely fallen into a state of extreme shock. This secret room seemed to have spatial properties. It looked small from the outside, but it was very big inside. Both sides of the entrance were filled with dark creatures sealed in jars. There was a giant dark lizard sleeping on its stomach. There were skeleton soldiers with bone knives in their hands, staring at them covetously. There were also skeleton soldiers with all kinds of ghostly flames in their eyes. It was like a rainbow skeleton girl group. The Death Knight, Dark Knight, and Headless Knight formed a group. The dark giant had shrunk to the size of a palm. Or rather, the jar itself had spatial properties. William looked down. The little guy wanted to jump up and hit his knee, but it could not even break the jar. Then, there were various kinds of dark creatures that William could not name. In this corridor, William saw hundreds of different kinds of dark creatures. Next, he came to the room of the secret room. There were also various jars. But in this small room, there were all kinds of devils, balrogs, succubi, dretches, hunter spiders, berserker demons, judgment demons, and so on. In short, all the devils in the dark world were in this small room. They were like the decorations in a noble's house. They were placed everywhere. Most importantly, they were still alive. Jared glanced at William's gaze and laughed. "We're tired of these things. Let me show you the big treasure of the seven of us." The prince swallowed his saliva, but he did not dare to refuse. He could only follow the seven sages into the slightly dark basement. There was a mysterious magical door in this basement. The president of the Demon Hunter Guild threw out thousands of magic runes to slowly open the door. It was enough to show how much importance he attached to the thing behind the door. At that moment, the lights were bright. Various pink furniture, carpets, and even beds appeared in front of William. It did not look like a basement at all. Instead, it looked more like a noble lady's bedroom. And sitting on the bed was a black Dark Lord dressed in white silk and a pink dress. The prince couldn't hold it in and choked on his own saliva. He coughed violently. This Lord of Darkness was not a female, but a F*** male. However, he seemed to have taken some kind of medicine that caused his body to be slightly smaller. When the King of Darkness heard the voice, he just stared blankly at him for a moment before lowering his head to look at his legs like a pitiful doll, making people unable to help but feel a sense of pity. No, only a demon hunter would have such a feeling. However, there was no need to worry too much. This King of Darkness had hundreds of seals on his body, causing him to be like a weak and powerless woman. However, there was clearly no one here just now. Why didn't he take off his skirt and stockings and restore his manly nature? Well, this was a question worth pondering. And after thinking about it deeply, I realized that he had been completely toyed with. Oh, my weak heart seems to have been bombarded by nuclear weapons. William clutched his chest. He could no longer look at the Lord of Darkness or the seven sages. But it was okay. The seven holy seat bigwigs didn't care about his gaze at all. The president, who looked like an old man, even walked up to White Silk with a smile. He touched White Silk's thigh and comforted her. "Lilith, don't be afraid. We'll find you a companion today. Remember to be good." The Lord of Darkness, named Lilith's body trembled, but she did not resist. She allowed the sages to do whatever they wanted to her. It was not that she did not want to resist, and it was not that she did not resist. But the price of resisting was unbearable. She would even squat in a corner and cry silently. It was true. She had lived for so many years. But ever since she had been captured by them, she had suffered more grievances in the past 100 years than she had lived for 10,000 years. At this moment, Jarrod laughed. "William, take out your Lord of Darkness. It's time for the auction. Okay, let's go somewhere else." William gulped. He almost crushed the space scroll to escape. But what made him despair was that among the seven sages, there was not only a space Grand Mage Sage, but there was also a time Grand Mage Sage. Gan Lingyang. It was no wonder that the Lord of Darkness did not even have the chance to escape. Faced with such a powerful group of seven, how could he escape? Unless he could reach the peak of the sage level. But William also felt that Jarrod, who was a spirit-type sage who specialized in both combat and magic, seemed to be at the peak of the sage level. Very soon, they arrived at a conference hall. William was not afraid that they would snatch it. After all, they were sage experts, and they could not do such a shameless thing. He directly took out the sealed and bound agars from the alternate dimension. Dirty, dirty. Agar struggled frantically, but his mouth was sealed. Every part of his body was bound by chains, and his cultivation was completely sealed. He could only keep rolling on the ground. He had no power to resist. Of course, William's sealing technique was still a little inferior to these big shots. It was called artistic play, but William's was like a pig being slaughtered. That's too violent. How can you deal with this little cutie like this? Come, let Uncle untie the chains for you. An earth element warrior walked over with a disdainful gait. Agars turned his head to look at the seven burly men, whose eyes were flickering. He immediately started howling dirty. Like a mudfish, he crazily rolled on the ground in front of William. He wished that William could tie him up and seal him in an alternate dimension. He did not want to fall into the hands of these sage demon hunters. Other things aside, in the dark world, one could not know about the Temple of Light. But one must know about the Demon Hunter Union, because to humans, the dark world was hell on earth. But to devils, the Demon Hunter Union was the devil's hell. However, they knew that they were useless, because they never entered the dark world to look for trouble. They would only use all kinds of methods to catch the lone devils and take them in. Some of the devils who escaped, even if they could return to the dark world, would often commit suicide because they could not bear the memories or find an expert to seal their past experiences. It was simple. The Tai Chi bar was terrifying. Hence, William stepped on him and chuckled. Maybe you don't know, but he's Agars, one of the 72 devil gods, ranked second. He's very famous in the dark world. You'll have a good reputation if you talk about him. Although he's a berserker demon, look. William lifted Agars up as if he was selling pork. He pointed at the flesh on his chest, waist, and arms. His soft and tender skin and his not-so-rough appearance are the best in the dark world. The key is that he's a sage, which means that he has almost indestructible mental strength. I guarantee that you'll be satisfied for a long time. Agar's was stunned. Could it be that the sage had almost indestructible mental strength? Was it used for this? F***CK, your grandpa. Dirty, dirty. The Dark Lord shook his body frantically, as if he wanted to fight with William. Jarek touched the white hair on his head and licked his lips. He looked at Agar's carefully and nodded in agreement. It makes sense. His mental state is much better than Lilith's. What do you think? The Time Warlock Saint stroked his chin and said thoughtfully, well, let's give Lilith a vacation. He is only 9 meters tall, and the muscles on his body are not too explosive. As long as he uses a little potion, he will definitely become very soft. He will be much stronger than Lilith. When that time comes, he will definitely feel very good. Look, did you see the look in his eyes? It's like he's about to cry. Oh my God, I really like that look in his eyes. The feeling of conquest is so strong. Then, let the auction officially begin. William did not know why these people wanted to auction separately when they could play together. Could it be that? Did they want to monopolize a Dark Lord so that they could have a greater sense of conquest? That was possible. William could not guess the thoughts of the sage demon hunters. 5 mithril veins, 5 orichalcum veins, 5 adamantine veins, 3 magical stone veins, 3 magical crystal veins, and 3 warrior armors for legendary professions. They are of the metal, wood, and water elements respectively. The Time Mage Saint said immediately. William's expression changed slightly. Gosh, there were a few rich ones. Actually, the ore veins that they mentioned were not unmined. They were just a rough estimate. The Time Warlock Saint was indeed a rich man. His words dealt a blow to many Saint demon hunters, and 3 of them looked desolate. After all, no matter how valuable the Dark Lord was, they could not exchange it with divine and sacred weapons, right? But don't forget that there was still the oldest person here. He was the founder of the Demon Hunter Guild, Vesemir. The old man squinted his eyes and laughed. He immediately increased the number of ore veins by 1, and he also added 2 pieces of legendary armor. He was definitely a super rich tycoon. The prince was tempted because Agar's had long been skinned by him. Apart from killing him for some EXP, it was far better to sell him for some resources. But he blinked his eyes greedily. Are there any more? Really? If there's no more, I'll hand over this sage position is eternal, and the Dark Lord is eternal treasure to the guild leader. 3-2. Wait a minute, Jarek shouted. The Demon Hunter Guild leader, Vesemir, glanced at Jarek, and the latter coughed dryly. I'm sorry, teacher. Lilith is your private collection. You can only let us play with her when you're happy. But I really want to have my own Dark Lord. I'll offer a treasure that I made myself, which is a sage-level soul weapon. William's eyes widened. The other sages were also dumbfounded. Soul weapon. What was that? That was a life. Chapter 617. When it came to soul tools, Voldemort had to be mentioned. Of course. He was an antique character in a 21st century novel and did not have much to do with this soul tool. However, the 2 of them had the same effect through different means. That was, the existence of each soul tool was equivalent to giving the holder an extra life. As for the way to use it, it was much more complicated. It was certainly not like what Voldemort had done in the past, where the soul was directly cut into several pieces and stuffed into various soul tools. If William wanted to completely use this soul tool, he needed to inject soul power into it day and night for a long time. Only when it had the same amount of soul power as his own could he use it. Bah! No one wanted to use a soul tool, because it was equivalent to a resurrection. That was, at the moment when the user's soul was about to dissipate, the soul power in this soul tool would appear out of thin air in the body, allowing the user to resurrect on the spot. The effect was very strong, but the side effects were not small. A person could only have 2 soul tools at most. If there were more, the source of the soul would be severely damaged, which was not conducive to breaking through, especially for a sage. As long as the soul did not dissipate, the physical body could not completely die, no matter how badly it was beaten. Just like Agar's head had been smashed by William, it still depended on time to slowly recover. And in this case, the importance of the soul was self-evident. But the way to make a soul tool was very difficult, and the materials needed were very rare. In the entire world, except for soul and spirit-type sages who could make it, no one else could. But even so, without the support of other sages or large forces, a soul and spirit-type sage could at most gather 1 or 2 soul tools for his own use. So this thing had become a priceless treasure. The martial sage probably had one too. This might also be one of the reasons his father did not kill him. That was because the martial sage knew that he could not beat Roger's Lucky. Even if he could resurrect, he would probably abandon his physical body and use his soul to resurrect in a faraway place. He would not even have the thought of fighting back. But when William killed him in the future, even if this guy died, he might resurrect and fight again, and then die again for this kind of treasure. William had no reason to refuse. He immediately threw Agar's, who was in despair, over. He also received the soul tool that looked like a pearl. Worth it. What a killing. Both of them revealed lascivious smiles at the same time and looked at each other. Their eyes were full of admiration, as if they were lamenting that the number of such people was too small. Just as William was about to leave this obscure place and slip away, the other people's faces were full of smiles. The men on his left and right blocked his way. He was stopped. Yes. In particular, the Earth-type battle saint was still swaying his muscular body as he said with a smile, "William, don't go. My house is quite big, and there are many things in the room that you haven't seen before." Holy **T. At this moment, William's heart turned cold. He quickly swallowed his saliva and hurriedly said, No, my mother has already prepared dinner. She's waiting for me to go home for dinner. By the way, I heard that my father is also coming home. He will definitely be anxious if he doesn't see me. As soon as he finished speaking, the Earth-type battle saint's expression changed, and he quickly coughed lightly. Oh, then you should hurry home. Boys should also be careful when they go out. Don't forget to send our regards to Rogers. Goodbye, I'm leaving. His Royal Highness turned and ran. But after he left, the Earth-type battle saint laughed mischievously. This guy is very cautious. What's wrong with you? Why did you scare him? It's because he's good-looking. I've never seen such a handsome man. I almost couldn't control myself. But what if he captures the Lord of Darkness in the future and doesn't sell him to us? Hiss! The Earth-type battle saint inhaled a breath of cold air. He had almost forgotten about this matter. He hurriedly sent out a few transmission scrolls. But he discovered MMP. There was no signal. Jarrig helplessly glanced at him and could only roll his eyes as he scolded. Damn, it's all because of those sons of cheese under us that ruined our reputation. Yes, and you too. What was wrong with the Demon Hunter Union? It was not a large gay union. Why were the outsiders so afraid of it? We are only targeting the dark creatures. Someone sighed. At this moment, many people's expressions did not look too good, because the 7 saints present, or the vast majority of the core members of the Demon Hunter Union, had embarked on such a path of no return because they had a blood feud with the dark creatures. Most of their families were killed by the dark creatures. Their friends died in the hands of the dark creatures. So did their comrades. And as time went on, I kill your people, you kill mine. This caused some demon hunters' hearts to be twisted, and they constantly carried out some extreme revenge on the dark creatures. President Vesemir calmly clapped his hands. Forget it. There's nothing to explain. Why should we, the Demon Hunter Union, act according to other people's wishes? President is right. Business is more important. Although first I bought this, Jarrig hurriedly said. At the same time, Agar's also felt that the 7 of them were staring at him. At that moment, the sun seemed to have set. Darkness floated in his heart. The training of the 7 little saints officially began. William left the headquarters of the Demon Hunter Union as if he was in a trap. He was afraid that the sages would come and capture him. *M, my beauty level is too much. The next time I do business, I'll try to get them to come over. Otherwise, I'll have to become uglier before going over. Otherwise, it's very dangerous for a boy to go out. The internet is right about this. William finally heaved a sigh of relief when he arrived at the royal city of the war-ending empire. Meow Meow, who was in his arms, stuck out her pink tongue and greedily inhaled the air. She had almost suffocated to death. Well, it was not the smell. William's smell was very pleasant, but there was too much sage aura, and she almost peed her pants. Fortunately, Meow Meow knew in whose arms she was, so she did not dare to do so. But even in her original form, she shyly covered her eyes with her two small paws. She did not dare to look at the handsome prince. William supported her body with his left hand, and his right hand slowly stroked her little head and cat ears. Soon, Melinda was snoring in comfort. She even whimpered, "Meow, meow, so comfortable." Comfortable, isn't it? This is my ancestral skill. William raised his eyebrows confidently. The female cat, Moses, had been very indignant with William in the past, but now she was obedient to him. But even though the black cat was at the epic level, it could not transform unless it consumed some kind of transformation potion. It was a pity. Moses did not intend to do so. Otherwise, he would have another cat ear girl. A real man could only stroke two cats together. Only a sissy would play with a dog. William did not know if it was because he had forgotten to disguise himself, but when he walked by, all the girls on the street could not help but stare at him. It seemed to be the reason. The guards of the royal city had to rush out to maintain order to prevent the group of girls from disturbing the Lord of Dawn stroking his cat. Ding dong. William took out a magic transmission scroll. It was the second prince of Caesar. "Don't leave. You're already in the royal city, but you didn't let me entertain you." William pursed his lips. This guy was getting more and more powerful. He had only appeared for less than half a minute, and he was already spotted by the spies on the street. So he could only reply, "Eat, eat, eat. All you know is to eat. But where are we going to eat?" William smacked his lips. Caesar was now rich and overbearing. 2/3 of the officials and nobles of the empire supported him. If he did not eat a meal from Caesar, he would feel sorry for his stomach. "Good place. I'll get someone to bring you there." Soon, a Grandmaster professional walked in front of William politely and bowed. "Greetings, Lord of the City of Dawn. The second prince asked me to bring you there." William casually placed Melinda on his shoulder and nodded. "Let's go." 9 levels. William glanced at the restaurant. It was called the 9 Levels Restaurant. In his previous life, he had come here for a free meal. At that time, someone had treated him, but he could only eat on the 3rd floor. He could not go up to the highest 9 levels. It was rumored that the highest level even had legendary dragon meat. Not only did he have to be rich, but he also had to have a high status. But his current status was enough, but he wasn't interested in going to a restaurant to show off as a low-level hobby. He had no choice. He was the most powerful person in the City of Dawn. He did not need to show off. But this was the imperial city of the human empire. It was a gathering place for nobles, high officials, and various top professionals. They needed this kind of restaurant to show off their status. It was not a tavern frequented by mercenaries and adventurers. William's appearance was not widely known, but in the self-destruction imperial city, where he often appeared, all the famous forces, nobles, and high officials knew what he looked like. Some of them even had his portrait in their homes. The restaurant attendant did not expect him to come here, but he remembered that the second prince of Caesar had just arrived. He hurriedly and respectfully welcomed him to the 9th level. The most important thing was, William's battle record of killing a sage had spread throughout the legendary continent. After a period of time, his name would resound throughout the gods' continent. And this was one of the key reasons why the pedestrians on the street did not move after seeing him. He was not just handsome. Of course, his looks played a big part. Therefore, under the gazes of countless nobles and officials, William finally arrived at the top level. Caesar was standing nearby with a smile. He invited William to take a seat. There was no one else around. There was no outsider on the entire floor. "Tycoon, it would be good if you could give me the gold coins to book the entire restaurant." William complained. He placed Meow Meow on his lap and asked curiously, "Why are you so formal today? Do you need my help?" The second prince rolled his eyes. "Am I that kind of person?" William did not speak. He just stared at Caesar. 3 seconds later, Caesar could not help but say helplessly, "Help, brother. My father-in-law's outpost can't take it anymore." "What?" William raised his eyebrows. "Your father-in-law's outpost? Has your father-in-law become a sage? Even if your father-in-law can't take it anymore, isn't your father-in-law a peerless battle sage? He's a peak sage. If he goes there, he can suppress anyone who is not convinced. Moreover, isn't there the war-ending empire? The war-ending empire is only in charge of an outpost. There are so many sages in your family. Do they eat sh*t?" Caesar knew what William's doubt meant. He could only say helplessly, "My grandfather is too powerful. You know that he is called the peerless battle sage. His battle record must be very strong. Actually, at the end of the Second Era, he killed 7 or 8 Lords of Darkness. If he dares to go to the Dark World, he will only attract more enemies. As for the other sages, they can't leave. One of them went to the fantasy continent with your father. Don't talk nonsense. I don't believe that the war-ending empire doesn't have other sages." William narrowed his eyes, his face full of distrust. Caesar was about to speak when plates of delicacies were pushed over by the waiters. The waiters placed the legendary delicacies on the table. Caesar scratched his head again and said, "The war-ending empire has secretly developed an outpost. Damn, they are so greedy." The corners of William's mouth twitched. But the war-ending empire's method was not wrong. As long as they chose a good location, they could take advantage of the time when the Pope of Light was suppressing the Dark World to launch an attack. Although building an outpost would at least restrain 1 or 2 sages, there were many resources in the Dark World. But there were a lot of resources in the Dark World. As long as the outpost was not wiped out, they could still get the job done. In the future, it would be a profitable business. There were probably quite a few powers like the war-ending empire that were doing this. So even though 13 outposts were destroyed on the surface, there might be more hidden sages in the Dark World. But in this way, at least 4 sages of the war-ending empire were restrained in the Dark World. The peerless battle sage could not attack easily. Another sage was taken away by William's father. TSK, there were 6 sages. The war-ending empire's capital had basically been depleted. Even if there were any sages, it would be at most 1 or 2. Or rather, the key reason why the peerless battle sage and the rest could not go to the Dark World was because they had to guard the war-ending empire and prevent other enemies from assassinating the emperor. After all, it was a huge human empire. How could there not be a few sages guarding it on the surface? William ate a mouthful of legendary dragon meat, and his attributes increased by a little. But it did not taste good. When Caesar ate, he did not taste good either. He kept glancing at William from the corner of his eyes. 3 minutes later, William sighed. "Tell me, what do you want me to do? Send some reinforcements?" "Well, the military strength of the war-ending empire is not a problem. The key is the geographical location of the outpost. There are 3 Dark Lord around it, but there are many resources there." "Huh? Can you go personally? Don't you know that people call you Lin Sheng?" "You're talking about Lin Sheng. Have you read the history books? He's stronger than ordinary sages. Please help him." Caesar's voice became softer and more mysterious. "Ahem, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't talk nonsense. I'm not Sage Lin." William almost spat out the wine in his mouth. "Sage Lin. F***CK. That was a big compliment. What was Sage Lin?" "A legendary Sage Lin was Sage Lin. Of course, even if a legendary Sage Lin killed a sage, he would only kill the weaker sages. But there were no exceptions. If such a powerful being could enter the sage realm, he would become an advanced sage or even a peak sage. In the history of the Gods continent, the number of Sage Lin was even lower than the number of sages. If it was said that a sage realm expert would appear every few decades or centuries, then there would be one. It was extremely rare for a Sage Lin to appear unless it was the turn of the years. As for how many Sage Lin there were in the legendary continent, the Lord of the City of Chaos did not kill a sage, so he could not be considered a Sage Lin. But no one doubted that he had such combat power. Next was Hell Knight Daniel. His Royal Highness had tried to find out more about Daniel and had even befriended him a few times. Only then did he realize that Daniel's current battle prowess was already extraordinary. He seemed to already possess the battle prowess of a high-level saint. It was as if the dark world was his home. He often discovered new things for William to visit him. His home was huge. In the future, some of the reincarnations of the main deities had the combat power of a Sage Lin. Even the taboo master of the Rune continent was a Sage Lin. That was right. If his father's breakthrough was an advanced sage, his divine equipment was at the peak of the sage realm, then he was also a Sage Lin. But the Blackleaf Elves' great elder was the Dawn King. He was also an advanced sage. Even though his father had the combat power of a sage, he could only go to the desperate continent to seek a breakthrough. But what about William? He relied on Odin's avatar. He was not a true Sage Lin, especially when his level had not reached the peak. But then again, Odin was an avatar, but it was his own avatar. Was the avatar that he cultivated considered an external force? So it was not wrong to say that he was a Sage Lin. But the 10th outpost, I know. But the 10th outpost had 2 Dark Lords killed in battle. They were captured, and 8 million dark creatures were wiped out. To put it bluntly, now that you're wandering around here, you should know that in a short period of time, or even a year and a half, there won't be any Dark Lord paying attention to your outpost, right? William scratched his head. He knew the reason. He was not worried about the safety of the 10th outpost at all. Let me say something that is not boasting. As long as Ursula did not wander around, there was no need to be afraid of the Dark Lords. Even if some old immortal gods or great devil kings came, there was no need to be afraid. Because Ursula, who was able to kill the Sage Lin, was definitely not an ordinary person. He might even be stronger than his father. But friendship was friendship. Business was business. William and Caesar had a good relationship, but William's suggestion was like a business discussion. William naturally had to put on a difficult expression. William pondered for a full 10 minutes. He felt that it was about time. He looked at Caesar solemnly and said, "All right, I'll make a trip there. I'll try my best to help you. As deep as possible." "That's good. You'd better work hard and kill a Dark Lord." "It's true. If you really capture and kill a Dark Lord, the resources around that outpost will only be given to you 30% less." Caesar immediately stood up and gulped down the wine in his cup. William raised his eyebrows. 30% was not a small amount. He did not need to send a single soldier. He only needed to send one person. The prerequisite was to kill a Dark Lord. William did not hesitate. He would be the future king of peace. He also stood up and finished his wine. But after he agreed, he could not help but ponder. Sage Lin, it sounded nice. But if too many sages were killed, it would cause dissatisfaction among many sages. The most important reason was sages were born to suppress legendary professionals. It was like a high-level creature suppressing a low-level creature. It was suffocating. This also showed the superiority of the sages. But this also caused many sages to dislike the sage legendary professionals. They felt that they had broken the rules. "I won't kill them. I'll just capture them. Is that enough?" William narrowed his eyes. He seemed to have thought of a good idea. Then, William and Caesar did not intend to waste the food on the table. The food was of legendary quality. As long as they did not consume too much, they could increase their attributes. There was no reason to leave the food for the restaurant owner to secretly eat. When William bade farewell to Caesar, Caesar told him that if possible, it would be better to go as soon as possible. Right now, the outpost was in a state of being besieged, and they urgently needed a powerhouse to break the siege. William nodded and said that he would arrive in 3 days. Then, he returned to the City of Dawn. It was Milanda's first time here. She jumped down from William's arms and transformed into a cat lady. At that moment, many pedestrians on the street were stunned. But William did not mind. He was still a virgin. If they dared to think about it, they would have to pay double the price. So, he summoned a beautiful gargoyle. "Her name is Milanda. Take her to the intelligence department to report." "Yes, Your Highness." Milanda looked at William in a daze. She thought that she would follow William around all day. She did not expect to be abandoned the moment she arrived at the City of Dawn. What was this? A tool? A tool to be abandoned? Woo-woo. She wanted to cry. Unfortunately, His Royal Highness didn't have the time to deal with the little kitten. He took out the soul vessel and began to coil it with greater strength. Since he could digitize, he didn't have to coil it for a few months like the other professions to get a second life. He only needed 7 or 8 days to have a second life. He could hide it in the Yggdrasil. Even if his physical body was destroyed and he did not dare to resurrect, he could be resurrected from the Yggdrasil. It was simple. He was a very cautious lord. He decided to save the soldier. Before saving Caesar's father, he had to coil it for a second life.